Oh man. It's all right. I got one. It's still not done.
Stupid, dumb.
Yeah, there we go. Oh my god. It's the daily download. Ba-da-da-da-da-da. Na-na-na-na-na-na. Na-na-na-na-na-na. I have one viewer. Hello, one viewer. I love you so much. Thank you for coming. It's the daily download. Oh my god, that's so pretty. So pretty. How are you? How are you, viewer? I love that you're here. It's a daily download. I'm trying to figure out, I don't know which fucking YouTube channel this thing is on, which is odd. I can't find the Senate Intelligence Committee or their YouTube channel. Not sure why. It's the daily download. Oh, I don't have a... Oh, I do. I have a spoon. So we're waiting for this hearing to start. I'll try and make it bigger. Hold on. I don't know if this is going to work. For some reason, I don't think that actually works. Hold on. Let me try this. Okay. Perhaps. Mayhaps. Well, that certainly is a little bit better. Anyway, welcome to the Daily Down Low Low Part 2. Hi, Teresa. How are you? Oh, I didn't want blueberries. Dang it. I don't like blueberries. I don't like blueberries. Can I be spicy for a minute? I'm not a blueberry fan. I'm just not. Hello to everyone on Twitter. Elmo let me in his back door. He's that kind of guy. No shame in that game. But sorry, I don't like blueberries. Someone will eat them. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm trying to eat some acai and granola. Okay, pop. Hold on. Move 'em up.
I want to call this hearing to order, and I want to welcome today's witnesses. I want to warn them at the outset, we are
I've been muted the
finishing
whole
up one vote.
time.
We'll have another one. We're going to work through that process, but if people are slipping in and out, I think you understand. Our witnesses today are Avril Haines, the Director of National Intelligence.
I'm sorry.
Jen Easterly, Director of Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. And Lisa Knapp, Executive Assistant Director of the National Security Branch at the FBI. Welcome to all of you. Today's hearing builds on this committee's bipartisan efforts since 2016 to educate the public on the intentions of foreign adversaries seeking to undermine the integrity of our democratic systems, and to ensure that U.S. government is postured to protect our elections from those foreign threats. A broad interagency task force is tasked with protecting from two forms of election interference we've seen since 2016. Interference efforts, often cyber-enabled, that target election infrastructure, and separately, influence efforts that seek to affect elections through covert or other illegal tactics. Since 2016, we have held both open and closed hearings ahead of each federal election, featuring testimony from U.S. officials, social media executives, and open source research executives. This is the first open hearing of this campaign season, but more will be coming. Now, I want to start by recalling the fact that I fear at times, since particularly the 2016 cycle was so long ago, that the public perception of past foreign election meddling has too often been treated as something that was trivial or not of major league. But as this committee's exhaustive bipartisan investigation into Russia's meddling in 2016 election showed, and as declassified intelligence community assessment showed, foreign influence efforts go well beyond simple online trolling or traditional propaganda. Foreign election efforts in the last 8 years have, among other things, involved efforts to infiltrate both online and in person a range of U.S. organizations on both sides of the political spectrum with the goal of stoking political polarization in the United States and promoting social and racial strife. We've seen as well successful impersonations of U.S. political and social organizations, with the Russian IRA, memorably back in 2016, having Twitter and Facebook accounts for the Tennessee GOP and Black Lives Matter. Both of those accounts were actually bigger than the real organizations. We've seen harassment and sting operations against U.S. candidates, particularly as when we saw just last cycle, the PRC influence operatives try to set up a sting operation to bully and humiliate a congressional candidate of Chinese heritage. We've seen successful efforts to actually organize real-world political rallies. Back in 2016 again, with one almost coming to real-life violence. Russian efforts orchestrated simultaneous rallies in Houston, one with an anti-Muslim event taking place at exactly the same time and place as a Muslim cultural event. Luckily, law enforcement intervened. We have also seen personalized emails sent in 2020 by Iranian influence actors posing as Proud Boys, which the Trump administration leadership did a good job of pointing out. Globally, we've seen many of the same foreign influence actors aggressively meddling in the elections of our Democratic allies. The PRC's influence actors aggressively sought to shape the outcome of Taiwan's election earlier this year, including promoting narratives that the election had been rigged as election day neared. More recently, literally in the last few weeks, Czech and Belgian officials have disclosed efforts of Russian operatives to shape the outcome of June's EU elections with the goal of undermining European support for Ukraine. And a wide range of media open source research and other sources has similarly pointed to Russian influence operations in Slovakia, one of the cases that I think is particularly interesting, a country that when Russia invaded, 75% plus of the Slovaks supported Ukraine. A few years later, due to Russian efforts, Slovakia now has a pro-Russian president, and literally 55% of those Slovaks have been told saying they think the United States started the war in Ukraine. We've seen recently as well deep fakes of the Moldavian president have been widely circulated. And fresh off the presses, just a couple hours, I'm not going to ask our witnesses to testify, but a new Russian effort geared at somehow saying that Zelensky and the CIA are working on trying to undermine again our elections in this year. The barriers to entry for foreign malign influence have unfortunately become incredibly small. Since 2016, we've seen declassified intelligence assessments name a whole host of influence actors who've engaged in, or at least contemplated, election influence and interference activities. Not only Russia, not only Iran or PRC, but also Cuba, Venezuela, terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, and a range of foreign hacktivists and profit-motivated cybercriminals. One of the things, and why I think this hearing is so important, in many ways, our adversaries could be more sophisticated and aggressive in both scale and scope in this election, even than in prior years. Let me tell you why I think that's the case. First, our adversaries are more incentivized than ever to intervene in our elections because they can understand that it could affect their particular national interest. In the case of Russia, Putin clearly understands that influencing public opinion and shaping elections in the United States is a cheap way to erode American and Western support for Ukraine. Similarly, we've seen the conflict between Israel and Hamas has been fertile ground for disinformation since October 7th. Second, the scale and sophistication of these sorts of attacks against our elections can now be accelerated by AI tools. The truth is, the kind of audio and video manipulation that even as recently as 4 years ago and clearly 8 years ago was still a challenge, now can happen at a speed and scale due to AI tools that's unprecedented. And literally, there's not a week or month that goes by that those AI video and audio tools don't continue to improve. And I just, on a personal note, I fear that Congress's inability to pass any new guardrails in the last 18 months for AI-enabled mischief really could pose a huge problem. We've already seen fake video of President Trump embracing Dr. Fauci. We've seen audios of President Biden telling people to use a different voting day in New Hampshire. The truth is, these tools are out there and growing in their danger. Third, we've seen, unfortunately, increasingly large numbers of Americans of all political stripes across the political spectrum who simply don't trust U.S. institutions, from federal agencies and law enforcement to mainstream media, who increasingly rely on the wildest conspiracy theories imaginable that pop up on the web. And fourth, since 2022, we've seen a concerted litigation campaign that has sought to undermine the federal government's ability to share on any kind of voluntary basis vital threat information with social media platforms. And unfortunately, since 2022, we've seen from some of those same social media platforms considerable disinvestment and, in certain cases, utter disinterest in platform integrity by some of those social media companies. And an area where the Vice Chairman and I have worked very closely together, we've seen the rise of a dominant social media platform, TikTok, with ownership based in a country that is clearly adversarial in terms of their intents on our elections. It is these kinds of attempts by foreign actors and adversaries to sow disinformation, undermine confidence in elections, and seed discord that Americans can expect their federal agencies, both law enforcement and intelligence, to help detect and defeat. We've got to do a better job of making sure Americans of all political stripes understand what is very probably coming their way over the next less than 6 months. I hope today's witnesses can provide a comprehensive overview.
Sam was going to eat my blueberries.
Current threats and anything that may
Don't
be
eat
emerging.
the blueberries, Sam.
And what we can do in a collaborative, cooperative, bipartisan way to make sure that the public is aware of this, I think, dramatic threat to our democracy. And with that, I'll turn it to the Vice Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks for calling this hearing, and thank you all for being here on this important topic. And by the way, it's one I think we're going to be dealing with for the next quarter century. but it's hopefully one we get to learn from experience on. I always think it's important at the outset to sort of, because I
Speak
know
up,
this
Marco.
will be discussed as an election, threats to the election is a broad topic, and it's always bifurcated into two things. There's election interference, which is trying to hack into the voter database or messing with the early reporting, unofficial reporting system of a state, things of that nature. That's more easily understood. And then there is this whole topic of influence. And it's not just in elections, it's also in our debates. I mean, we saw elements of that during COVID. We see it during policy debates here on a range of topics. The propaganda has always been a weapon of war. I think today you can do it at scale, faster, more convincing, and in ways that spread very quickly and are difficult to contain. And in particular, and we've seen this globally. I mean, we've seen increasing amount of damage that's being done to the reputation of the United States in parts of Africa by a very active effort to undermine, make life very difficult for our diplomats who serve in that region, our military personnel in some of these countries where the Russians have moved in and gained greater influence. So all of that is happening at a global scale, and the chairman's already talked about some of the countries that have faced efforts to meddle in their elections and try to influence and steer the outcome, and in some cases successfully. But today, I think the focus is going to be on how this could be used in an election and in policy debates too, but let's focus on elections for a moment. And the reason why I want to really focus on that is I think we'll hear a lot about the tools that are available, the capabilities that someone has to put out an AI video, to spread narratives that are difficult to knock down and so forth, the weaponization of this information. What I hope to learn a little bit more about is when this happens, if this happens, who's in charge of responding to it? Have we thought through the process of what do we do when one of these scenarios occurs? Because I don't think I have a clear understanding of who's in charge and how we would respond, who would take the lead. I know that if a hurricane is headed towards the United States, the National Hurricane Center is going to put meteorologists on the air who are going to describe to us, this is the hurricane, this is what it looks like, this is how strong it's going to be when it gets here. They're going to put out forecasts. It's going to issue warnings, and people, Republicans, Democrats, no matter who you're going to vote for, are going to take the appropriate steps. If something like that were headed towards our election, I don't know who's in charge of putting it out there. More importantly, I think no matter who puts it out there, the candidate or issue on the other side of it, their followers are going to question whether it's the government interfering in the elections themselves. And it's not helpful as an example, and I use this as an example because it's a very
how do you
recent
think you
one.
can help that,
When the whole laptop
Marco? How do you
situation
think,
happened,
what do you think
the
you
Hunter
can do
Biden
to help
laptop,
that?
a number
think?
of former intelligence officials, I get it, they're formers, no longer in the employ of any of these agencies, but that title carries weight, all signed a letter saying this has all the hallmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign. We know now that it was not a disinformation campaign. I don't want to get into the particulars of what was on it. I'm just saying we now know that it was not a Russian disinformation campaign. But the result of it was that social media companies would not allow anyone to post the articles, and there was a media blackout. It could not be reported in any other except for one place. And so what happens as a result of that, whether it had an influence on the election or not, the result of it now is that we have some segment of the country who repeatedly says things like
actually
the
was
intelligence
Russian
community interfered,
disinformation.
even these reformers, but that title. And so why that is relevant here is because no matter who this disinformation campaign is geared after, the other side is going to say the people issuing the warnings are people that are interfering in the elections on behalf of the candidate they favor.
I don't think
so
if it were
presented
presented
we have to
in
begin by at least
a
understanding
serious
something
way,
to
it
happen.
would, Marco,
If tomorrow
except
there
for
was
if
a
you're
video,
looking for a reason.
very convincing video of a candidate, let's not say president, let's say
fuck
U.S.
off.
Senate or Congress, and a video comes out with 72 hours to go before Election Day of that candidate saying some racist comment or doing something horrifying, but it's fake. Who is in charge of letting people know this thing is
Wait
fake?
till you see the real
This
stuff
thing is
we
not
have your
real.
guy doing.
So that
For
we can
one
have
day,
people who don't go to the
Marco.
ballot box
One
believing
day.
something that's
One
not real is real. That's
single
influencing our
motherfucking
election,
day.
especially a close one.
Think about
And
your
I ask myself,
legacy.
whoever's in charge of it, what are we doing to protect the credibility of the entity that is, whoever it is in charge of saying it, so that the other side does not come out and say our own government is interfering in the election.
Well, you know,
So,
if you do,
I
if
think we're
you
gonna be
guys
struggling with
wouldn't
this
have
for a
made
very
that
long
your
time,
drumbeat,
because
then
the
maybe
Russians are
people
the
wouldn't
best
be
at it and doing it a
questioning.
long
Because when
time, and
people
so they
lie
know,
outright,
and
you should
they've perfected
stand
it,
up
but
and
they're
shout them
every
down,
election
Marco.
cycle,
That's
more and
your
more cast of
role as a
characters
fucking
are joining
senator.
the parade here in terms of getting into this business. And I think in the years to come, we're going to see more and more nation states and maybe non-state actors begin to not just come after us in our elections and our political process, but those of other countries as well. So this issue is not going away anytime soon. I think it's only going to accelerate. It's going to get worse. And we really need to begin to lay out some parameters about how we're going to respond to these things in a coordinated way that we know ahead of time, as opposed to the ad hoc basis in which this has been handled in years past in terms of responding to the disinformation piece of it. It's a
That's
tough
as
one to
much
handle,
of
but
Les
it's one
Mis as
that,
I can do.
I think we have to get a handle on.
I agree. I'm not sure. I think Director Haynes, you're going to lead us off.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Chairman Warner, Ranking Member Rubio, and members of the committee. I really appreciate having the opportunity to brief you on the intelligence community election security work alongside my colleagues at CISA and FBI who are leading efforts to take actions to secure our elections alongside the extraordinary state and local officials who are on the front lines of this work. The U.S. government's efforts to protect our elections have improved significantly since the 2016 presidential election, and even as the threat landscape is becoming increasingly complicated, it is my view that the U.S. government has never been better prepared to address the challenge. Protecting our democratic processes from foreign influence or interference is an absolute priority for the intelligence community. Our efforts are effectively organized by the Foreign Malign Influence Center, or FMIC, which houses the Election Threats Executive. And the Election Threats Executive leads, coordinates, and integrates the IC's activities, initiatives, and programs in this realm. And fundamentally, we support the federal government, particularly CISA and the FBI, as they work to secure our elections, as well as state and local election officials across the country who actually manage and secure the election infrastructure on a day-to-day basis. We do so by ensuring that our resources are aligned to promote collection and analysis so that we're able to identify and mitigate foreign threats to our elections and communicate our assessments to our federal partners, to you in Congress, to state and local officials, and to the American people. We also facilitate a notification framework that ensures that when relevant intelligence is collected concerning a foreign influence operation aimed at our election, appropriate notice is given to those who are being targeted so that they can take action. And while most of these notifications are non-public, there are, as you both indicated, scenarios in which public notifications are appropriate, and if doing so would render the foreign influence operation less effective, and that is part of that mandate. Of course, exposing a foreign actor's efforts is only one way in which we counter election threats. We support the law enforcement community as they disrupt election influence operations through legal action, including the disruption of illicit financial networks. And we also support Cybercom as it conducts a range of cyber operations to ensure that foreign adversaries cannot use our digital infrastructure to attack our elections. And using every tool we have is critical as the challenge is expanding. Over the last several years, we've seen really three trends that make the threat landscape more diverse and more complex. First, there are an increasing number of foreign actors, including non-state entities, who are looking to engage in election influence activities. Second, there are more commercial firms through which state actors are able to conduct election influence activities, often increasing the sophistication of such activities while making it more challenging to track down the original instigator of the foreign influence efforts. And then third, perhaps most obviously, relevant emerging technologies, particularly generative AI and big data analytics, are increasing the threat by enabling the proliferation of influence actors who can conduct targeted campaigns, reducing the number of relatively sophisticated influence operations and content, and further complicating attribution. For example, innovations in AI have enabled foreign influence actors to produce seemingly authentic and tailored messaging more efficiently at greater scale and with content adapted for different languages and cultures. In fact, we've already seen generative AI being used in the context of foreign elections. In September 2023, 2 days before the parliamentary elections in Slovakia, which, Chairman, you noted, a fake audio recording was released online in which one candidate discussed how to rig the upcoming election with a journalist. The audio was quickly shown to be fake, with signs of AI manipulation, but under Slovakia law, there is a moratorium on campaigning and media commentary about the election for 48 hours before polls open. And since the deepfake was released in that window, news and government organizations struggled to expose the manipulation. And the victim of the deepfake ended up losing in a very close election. To position the IC to address generative AI-enabled foreign influence efforts, we have an IC group focused on multimedia authentication that leverages DARPA's semantic forensics technology, among other tools, and enables those in the IC who are working on election security to rapidly access media forensic experts to facilitate the authentication of foreign suspect media related to the U.S. election. Members of this group regularly engage technical experts inside and outside of the government to ensure we are applying the latest techniques. And if state and local officials have concerns, for example, about media that is suspected to be synthetic or manipulated and violates a law or is tied to a foreign actor, they can request authentication assistance through the FBI. And of course, the most significant foreign actors who engage in foreign influence activity directed at the United States in relation to our elections are Russia, are the People's Republic of China, or PRC, and Iran. Specifically, Russia remains the most active foreign threat to our elections. The Russian government's goals in such influence operations tend to include eroding trust in U.S. democratic institutions, exacerbating sociopolitical divisions in the United States, and degrading Western support to Ukraine. Russia relies on a vast multimedia influence apparatus, which consists of its intelligence services, cyber actors, state media, proxies, and social media trolls. Moscow most likely views such operations as a means to tear down the United States as its perceived primary adversary, enabling Russia to promote itself as a great power, whereas Beijing seeks to promote support for China's policy positions and perspectives, including in the context of specific elections, portray the U.S. democratic model as chaotic, ineffective, unrepresentative, and magnify U.S. societal divisions. And the PRC also has a sophisticated influence apparatus through which they leverage emerging technologies, including generative AI, and they are growing increasingly confident in their ability to influence elections globally, but remain concerned about the possible blowback in the event their efforts are disclosed. In fact, in 2020, we assessed that China did not deploy influence efforts intended to change the outcome of the U.S. presidential election, principally because of concerns regarding blowback if caught. And thus far, we have no information to suggest that the PRC will take a more active role in this presidential election than it did in 2020, even as they continue to engage in efforts to promote politicians at all levels who are taking positions favorable to China on key issues. Needless to say, we will continue to monitor their activities. Finally, Iran is becoming increasingly aggressive in their efforts, seeking to stoke discord and undermine confidence in our democratic institutions, as we've seen them do in prior election cycles. They continue to adapt their cyber and influence activities using social media platforms, issuing threats, disseminating disinformation, and it is likely that they will continue to rely on their intelligence services in these efforts and Iran-based online influencers to promote their narratives. We've also observed other countries attempt to support or undermine specific candidates, but these efforts tend to be on a smaller scale. For instance, some other countries do things like direct campaign contributions to candidates they believe would promote their interest if elected and seek to obscure their support. In brief, the election threat landscape is increasingly challenging, but our capacity to manage the threat has also improved, as you will hear from colleagues. There is nothing more important or fundamental to our democracy than protecting our elections, and I can tell you that we are focused and ready to do our part, and I thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Chairman, Vice Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss CISA's efforts to protect and defend our nation's election infrastructure. Since 2017, when election infrastructure was designated as critical and CISA was designated as the Sector Risk Management Agency, CISA and our partners, including the intelligence community and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, have made significant progress increasing the security and resilience of the nation's election infrastructure, working to support state and local election officials who serve on the front lines of our democracy, administering, managing, and securing our elections. Election infrastructure has never been more secure, and the election stakeholder community has never been stronger. As a result, these election officials ran secure elections in 2018 and 2020 and in 2022. As you know, there is no evidence that malicious actors changed, deleted, or altered votes or had any material impact on the outcome of any of these elections. This, of course, has been validated time and again, including in multiple court challenges. And in any race that was close in 2020, there were paper records that could be counted and recounted and audited to ensure accuracy. In this job, I've had the privilege to spend time with chief election officials across the nation of both parties, and I know how tirelessly they work to ensure that their citizens' votes are counted as cast. It's why I have confidence in the integrity of our elections and why the American people should as well. However, we cannot be complacent. While election infrastructure is more secure than ever, as you just heard, the threat environment is more complex than ever. We have seen, as the DNI noted, that foreign adversaries remain a persistent threat to our election infrastructure, aiming to undermine American confidence in election integrity and our democratic institutions, and to sow partisan discord. These are efforts which will be exacerbated by generative AI capabilities. Perhaps more concerning are the continued physical threats to election officials, which largely stem from unfounded claims that the results of the 2020 election did not represent the will of the American people. Such claims are corrosive to the sacred foundations of our democracy, and they have led to harassment and threats of violence against election officials of both parties and their families. As a result, we've seen a wave of resignations, with election officials taking operational experience and institutional knowledge with them, and some of those who remain are operating under difficult conditions. We at CISA are very proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with these election officials, these election heroes, who are on the front lines of our democracy. In fact, CISA is providing more services in more jurisdictions than ever before, with training and resources featured on our Protect 2024 website. Since the beginning of 2023, we've provided over 340 cybersecurity assessments, 520 physical security assessments, 70 tabletop exercises, 220 training sessions that reach 9,000 election stakeholders every week. We provide reports to nearly 1,000 election entities with highlighting vulnerabilities so they can be immediately remediated. We've provided and sponsored 230 security clearances for election officials and worked with the intelligence community to provide classified briefings on foreign adversary threats. And most recently, we hired 10 dedicated regional election security advisors who bring a combined 210 years of election expertise and experience to work on the front lines with election officials. Finally, we remain laser focused on the threat of foreign malign influence operations, providing guidance as recent as last month on the tactics of disinformation used by our foreign adversaries. We'll continue to use our Rumor versus Reality website to provide accurate information about election infrastructure security, and perhaps most importantly, we will amplify the voices of state and local election officials who are the true authoritative subject matter experts when it comes to elections. These election officials know that while elections are political, election security is not, and we at CISA are committed to keeping it that way and look for your leadership and support in helping us do so. Thank you.
And it's my understanding, Ms. Knapp, you're not going to do opening, right? Let me, first of all, thank the witnesses for their testimony and particularly acknowledge what Jen Easterly just said is, our election officials are our election heroes, and many of them who serve diligently opening and closing polls for decades on end. The fact that they are under a level of harassment at this point really is one of the most serious efforts, I think, to undermine our democracy. Some of that may be domestically generated, but some of that could also be enhanced by foreign interest. Let me direct my first question to Director Haynes. Again, I think there has been some rewriting post-2016 that somehow some of the activities in Russia, or even in 2020 with Iran, that there was kind of harmless trolling. Can you speak to the fact that literally the level of violence that was incited in cases, or exacerbating racial strife, religious strife, these adversaries, these foreign adversaries, are trying to pit us against each other at unprecedented levels, literally leading to violence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you did a very nice job in the opening of highlighting a number of such incidents. I will say that just starting with Iran, it is, as I noted in the opening statement, increasingly aggressive in their efforts, seeking to stoke this kind of discord and promote chaos and undermine confidence in the integrity of the process. And they use social media platforms really to issue threats, to disseminate disinformation. And we saw how they did that in 2020. That's one of the incidents that you identified where they attempted to incite violence and threaten voters by sending spoofed emails designed to intimidate the voters, to incite social unrest, and distributing content basically including a video that implied that individuals could cast fraudulent ballots even from overseas, all entirely false, called out by my predecessor, Director Ratcliffe at the time, in 2020, and others in the intelligence community and law enforcement community. So I think that is a very good example. We've also seen Russia engage in these types of tactics, particularly in their global efforts to influence elections, trying to effectively incite disorder in order to distract sometimes law enforcement from being able to manage an election or do other things in that respect as well. I'll leave it at that.
And I would just say, I recall that incident, and again, it was a little bit of what Senator Rubio's question about, who announces, and there was a real show of force at that moment when we had the ODNI, we had the FBI director, we had the head of CISA. I believe, I'm not sure whether General Nakasone should, but it was, because our fear is who makes that message in a politicized environment. It needs to be people who are going to be viewed
welcome.
as
This
much
is
as
the
possible
Senate
credibly
Intelligence
by both
Committee
sides.
talking
And
about
I
threats
think
to the
in
2024
that case, the Trump
election.
administration did the
So
right
the
thing.
ODNI,
Lots and lots of talk about
the
AI.
DNI,
There's not a week
Director of
that
National
goes by that we don't see
Intelligence,
a new
the
enhancement,
head of CISA,
in terms
and
of
someone
either
else, I haven't heard them
video or
yet,
audio,
is testifying.
deep fake capabilities.
But this is a Senate hearing.
I don't think, even though we passed some bipartisan legislation out of the Rules Committee today that will get to national legislation on deep fakes, I would point out there's about a dozen plus states that have taken this on their own, and they range from red states to blue states and everything in between. So, and those of us who've been pushing the tech companies to do more, there were 20 tech companies that came together in what was called the Munich Accord, and this includes all of the big, it's the Facebooks, it's the Googles, it is also Twitter, TikTok, Anthropic, OpenAI, promising that they would have a commonality of watermarking so you can indicate if something has been altered. This is AI in elections. A commitment to try to take that content down and to educate voters. This was not just geared at America. Half the world is going to elections this year. Right now, India's got an election. The Europeans will have their parliamentary election shortly in June. I worry, that after that much publicized announcement in February, to use the old political term, where's the beef? I don't see that common watermarking standard emerging. I don't see these 20 tech companies moving in the aggressive nature that I would hope. I'd like to hear briefly from each of the witnesses on how you think the state of the collaboration between tech companies on making sure AI is not misused.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Chairman. I saw the letter that you sent out to those companies yesterday, which I think will be very helpful in getting specific answers. I will say we've been working with the generative AI companies specifically about threats to elections and ensuring that they are putting procedures and technology in place. Many of them are part of what's called CCPA, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authentication. In addition, one of the very useful things that they're doing is if there are any questions about elections, they're actually driving people who use that technology to sources like canivote.org or Trusted Info 2024, which is the National Association of Secretaries of State. Information that provides verified information at the state and local level. So it's really a validation that they are pushing people to those trusted sources. All that said, what we are doing are providing guidance to state and local election officials on AI threats and ways that they can mitigate such threats to their election infrastructure. We put out something in January and again in April about foreign malign influence.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that by saying that absolutely support everything that Jen just indicated. In addition, I think we're seeing both the opportunity for them to continue to provide detection tools, building relationships with some of the state and local partners, and that's been a part of what I think is important to continue to encourage. I think we're still in the process of watching them build out essentially their capacity and efforts in this area.
No,
and so
just call
things
it
like your
out,
statement, I think,
okay?
are helpful to sort
Fucking
of
stop
channel
this
that
corporate
energy and
fucking
to push
double
forward on it.
speak.
I think another
Stop.
thing that we're obviously doing
Just
is we've been
fucking
engaging
tell
with them
them
in order to make sure
this
that
is
we understand the
fucking
technologies they're
unbelievable.
bringing to bear to make
Corporations,
sure
those
that we're
corporations, the
producing
fucking
basically
words on the wall when you walk into the
state-of-the-art
Facebook offices in
identification
Mountain View or
services
wherever the
within
fuck it
IC
is,
and also for state
the
and local
words on the
partners as
wall
they
are
so
move
request
fast and
appropriately, as
break
I
things,
indicated, through the
okay? Their
FBI.
whole
And we're
goddamn
also promoting the
foundation
adoption of
is move
DARPA's
fast and break
technologies,
things.
frankly, in
So
this
you
area that
cannot
really
tell
allows
me
users to
that
detect and
Facebook or
characterize
Meta, with
falsified
all of its
media
all of its
assets to
infrastructure,
defend in
all of its
particular
brain
against
trust,
large-scale
all of its billions of
automated
dollars, cannot
disinformation
fucking
attacks
fix
to
this
public
right now
authorities
if they
and to
wanted
third
to.
parties. So I think all of that is sort of mutually reinforcing in this area.
Ms. Knapp?
Thank you, sir, for the thank
But
you, sir,
it's
for the
not
opportunity to respond.
lucrative.
Obviously, AI is definitely a concern to us as well. Whenever we get any sort of intelligence, we do provide it to the social media companies for action. Sorry, can you hear me now? When we do get any sort of intel indicating the hand of a foreign adversary, that information is provided to social media companies, whether it is as simple as an internet protocol address, an email address, or a phone number for them to take what action deemed necessary.
Right. And I understand the talk about protecting the infrastructure. It's very important. But I want to focus on it. And I'm going to largely base the scenario I'm about to outline. I'm going to base it on a CNN February 9th exclusive about a tabletop exercise. And it basically describes the following tabletop exercise. China creates a fake AI video showing a Senate candidate destroying ballots. And they're able to identify but that it's AI, that it's fake. So we have the ability to do that, and I think that's what you've described the DNI's office is able to do through that, through DARPA, I guess, the effort, the semantic forensics technology and all that. Okay, so we know it's fake. What the article says, and what I want to know, maybe the article's wrong and you could correct me, is after that, in this tabletop exercise, no one knew what happened next. There was, they struggled on what the response should be. There was a struggle, who would notify the public? According to this article, no, and the number 2 at the FBI, number 2 at CIA, number 2 at DHS was part of this tabletop. Nobody raised their hand and says that we will do it. We want to be the ones in charge of notifying the public. There was real consternation if, in fact, this was being promoted through a cutout, like maybe I imagine like a blogger. Let's say there's a right-wing blogger or a left-wing blogger, and that person is the one that released the video. Now there was certain fear that if we go out and say that this video is fake and this person is spreading it, people are going to say the government itself is interfering in our elections. And then a real question about if so many Americans already don't trust the federal government
See
and
Jim
the
Jordan.
intelligence agencies, how can we get them to trust us that this is not
You know
the
what?
real
You say that a
video?
lot,
So
and yet I
here's what
don't know
wanna
where
ask.
your
If,
data
in fact,
is.
a scenario like this
Okay,
plays out, video
so
comes
I
out.
would like to see the
I'm not
data.
on the ballot this year, so let's use me. Video comes out, and it's me in an audio recording, fake, saying, yeah, I'm going to rig the election, and I'm going to steal a bunch of ballots. It's fake. You know it's fake. What happens at that point? Because I'm now a week before the election, 6 days before the election. Does someone notify me? Am I able to say that? Is someone going to come out and say, this is not real, he really didn't say that? What happens? Because this article says it would be turned over to state and local officials. I don't know what a state and local official is supposed to do. They're going to turn around and say, yes, the DNI's office or the FBI or somebody told us this was fake. I don't understand what the process that would happen at that point is. Do we have a process that would kick in a situation like that one that I just described?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I wasn't at the tabletop exercise, so I don't know what happened in that particular scenario, but I understand that's not actually an accurate representation of what the discussion was. I would say that in terms of what would happen, yes, there would be a statement. So I think the model that I pointed to in 2020 is an appropriate model if there is basically a video or some fake, some deep fake or disinformation that's being promoted. It could be that we find out about it through intelligence. It could be otherwise identified, and it would go through If it's intelligence through the notification framework is an interagency group that basically indicates, okay, we think this is something that deserves a
I
public
apologize. I don't
statement.
mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you this.
Yeah, but if you want to
clarification.
fix
So
the notification
video is clearly
framework,
fake.
Senator
Yeah,
Rubio,
you'll be able
then
to-
by
you
all
may not be
means,
able
let's
to
crack
attribute
on
it
on
to
that.
a
If you
foreign
want to
entity.
fix the
You'll at least be able to
notification
say, this is
network,
not
would you like to
real,
fix the
we're working to see
notification
where it came
network?
from.
Because
Maybe it was designed by some guy in the
bureaucracy
basement,
and a
or maybe it was
process.
designed by a nation
But
state.
maybe it needs to be
But at a
fixed.
minimum, we have to be able to say this
You
thing
could be
is
right
not
about
real,
that.
and it could be the work of a foreign adversary. Who, I say we, but who would be, would you be the one that would stand up? Is it the DNI? Is it the FBI? Who would be the person that would stand before the American people and say, we're not interfering in the election, we just want you to know that video is not real? Who would be in charge of that?
Yeah, so I could be the person that goes out and makes that determination. And I'll just give you an example, frankly, one of the ones that the chairman just mentioned from this morning. There's an article today about the fact that there is a fake video that was basically promoted, we think, by Storm 1516. It's a Russian affiliated group, basically. And that video purports to show a whistleblower and a Ukrainian former employee of a made-up CIA-supported troll farm tasked
Yeah,
with
but you know,
interfering in
that's
the
so
upcoming presidential
conspiratorial,
election.
isn't it?
CIA
Oh my
immediately
God,
came
that's
out
so
with a statement
No,
that
it's
basically
not.
indicates and is
Fuck off,
reflected
everyone.
in the article
Jeez.
that this is fake. And I am here to say categorically that this claim is patently false, that there is no such thing. It is disinformation, and that is the kind of approach that we'll continue to take across the board.
Okay, but is that established that you would be, you say you could be the one that, I mean, who is, I guess my point is there really, I don't want there to be any gray area, like someone needs to be in
Doesn't
charge of
it make
interfacing with the
sense
American
that it would
people
be
and
dependent
ultimately
on
saying,
the
we will be
agency,
responsible
the
for
person
notifying the
implicated?
American
Like,
people?
wouldn't there
Yes,
be
that
some
been established?
coordination?
The
I
only
think that's all
hesitation
she's
that you
trying to
hear from me is
say.
based on the fact that there may be certain circumstances in which, for
Exactly.
example, a state or local official
Exactly.
or other basically public authority is in a better position
You
to
know
make
what?
the
You
public
can't,
statement initially
April,
and for the rest
you
of us to come back
can't treat him
behind.
like a
So
normal
it's just a
human being. You
question
cannot
going
treat
through
him
the
like a
process and
serious
determining
person.
what exactly is the issue that's being raised, what's the fake information that's being put forward, who is going to be the best, essentially, official to immediately come out
And who
and
makes that
disclaim
decision
it.
about who the best
That's
person is?
through, for example,
Probably
the notification
collaborative.
framework.
Bitch, read the notification
I think
framework.
it's a very valid question. And I'll remind colleagues, in open hearings, we go straight seniority. Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's good to have all three of you here. And I'd like to start by saying I've long believed that you have to follow the money to understand election interference in America. And today I want to start with influence buying, because I think one very effective way for a foreign adversary to interfere in an election is to compromise a candidate. And the best way you do that is with money. Now, last year, Donald Trump argued to a court that the value of his assets could not be inflated because he could always find a Saudi buyer who would pay any price that he would suggest. The judge was just taken aback. He wrote in his opinion that the statement of the former president suggested, quote, influence buying. So the question I'd like to ask you, Director Haynes, is let's set aside Donald Trump, okay, for purposes of this question. Is a foreign country's influence buying of a candidate, in your view, a counterintelligence concern and a form of interference?
Absolutely. And it's a tactic that we've seen, for example, the Chinese engage in quite regularly.
Good. Then let's go to data purchases, something you and I have talked about, because one way for a foreign adversary to tailor their influence is through the purchase of large amounts of Americans' private data. The executive order that President Biden signed on February 28th and the data export bill included in the recent foreign military and supplemental, those were welcome steps, and I think you know I've indicated that. But unlike the bipartisan bill I have with Vice Chairman Rubio, they only apply to a handful of countries, which in my view means they just don't really get the job done. So the question here, Director Haynes, is couldn't the countries covered by the executive order in the recently enacted data export legislation, like China and Russia, couldn't they just get the data from countries that aren't covered, either by taking advantage of weak privacy laws or setting up front companies?
I think it's sort of fact-specific, and it's hard for me to make a very broad generalization, but there's no question that both Russia and China, for example, look to obtain critical information, including, for example, polling data that ultimately allows them to determine the targets of their influence campaigns, including with respect to funding illicitly.
So would you work with the Vice Chairman, Senator Rubio, and I to clean up these loopholes and pass effective legislation? Because it just seems to me we can say there's progress, no question about that, but you're just going to have a lot of the people who are engaging in these corrupt activities just make their way to countries that aren't covered. Then they're going to look at weak privacy laws, they're going to look at front companies, and bam, we're off to the races again with more corruption of the election process. So I think we need to have the bill that the Vice Chair and I put in to really close that loophole, and I gather I ought to quit while I'm ahead because you said you'll work with us.
Absolutely. I'd work with you on really any legislation you have to offer, so
Very
please.
good.
Thank you.
So with respect to this election worker issue question for you, Ms. Knapp, we got a lot of interest in this strong statement that Director Wray put out. Wanted to make sure we protect election workers from threats of violence. This is something I hear from all of our county officials in my state. This is a obvious and ongoing threat to democracy. Tell us, if you would, Ms. Knapp, what you are involved with in this area about the harassment of election workers, the general incitement of violence. What are your priorities in this area?
Thank you for that question, sir. Obviously, as you had said, election workers are critical to our democratic process, and they are the front line of democracy. In terms of what we're seeing in this space is obviously election workers are being harassed via robocalls, via white powder letters, as well as swatting. And we take all of those incidents very seriously. We work very closely with the Department of Justice's Election Crimes Task Force. To date, since its inception in 2021, there have been 17 successful convictions, as well as 13 sentencing. We continuously work with state and local authorities on these matters to hold any and all individuals that have been identified accountable for those actions.
My time is up. I'm going to ask you a question for the record, Ms. Knapp, about this gentleman, Alexander Smirnov, and he was recently charged with lying to the Bureau, as you know, when he passed on disinformation about the Biden family. I'll ask you for the record. My time's up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's him right there.
Thank you,
That's him.
Mr. Chairman.
That's
I
him.
understand.
Right there. Right there.
But
I know
I
him.
apologize. I think Senator Rubio made reference to the letter which he and I sent to you, Director Haynes, regarding the 51 former intelligence community people who signed the letter regarding Hunter Biden. Does that ring a bell with you at all?
Yes, sir. I don't remember every detail of it, but I certainly
I'm going to
remember
help you
the
out
letter.
here. I'm going to help you out here.
Good deal. Thank you, sir.
No, it isn't a good deal, but I'm going to help you out. We asked 6 questions, and
Don't be
only one of those 6
disrespectful.
questions was answered. So I'm going to ask you here publicly. And by the way, let me tell you how this fits in. I'm as concerned with this sort of thing as I am with foreign interference on the election process. And this was deplorable. These 51 people saying this was Russian activity when we all know now that it wasn't. I mean, these were 51 people that had very significant influence in the
That's
in American
actually
society.
what the whole
And they
fucking
sent this letter
Smirnoff
saying
thing
that
is,
this
you
was
stupid
Russian
cunt.
influence.
I
Let me
mean,
ask some questions here.
are you not paying
One of the
attention?
questions we asked is how
Because
many
that's
of those
exactly why
51
fucking
people
Smirnoff is sitting
currently
in that
hold
fucking building
security clearance.
that
And that was
me,
as of May 31st
standing
of
in a fucking
2023. So
dinosaur
let me ask you
suit,
now, how many of those
is
51
standing in
people
front of.
still hold a security
and
clearance?
that's the day that he was
I believe he
arraigned
provided you with an answer
for
on that. I
lying
don't recall the
about the
I thought we did. All right, if we did not, we will get that to you shortly. We have that information.
All right, so how many of the Appendix A individuals maintain business arrangements, contracts, or other consulting arrangements with any element of the U.S. intelligence
even
community
talking
between
about
October
Rudy
1,
Giuliani.
2020 and October 31st,
Or Lev
October of
Parnas.
2020? That question was not answered.
Yes,
I
sir,
hope you have to
that
eat your
question we're
hat,
still
you
trying to
old
get an answer to.
motherfucker.
You're still trying to get an answer to it?
Yes, sir.
Excuse me?
This is security clearance as of October of 2020. Surely you got a
Can we
list
talk
of
about
these
Jared
people,
Kushner?
whether or not
How about
they
Jared
have
Kushner?
security
Can we start with
We
there?
have a list
Oh, what
of
about
the
the
people
guy
that
that
have security clearances. As I said, that's an
the
answer
guy
that
that
I
was
thought
had
we
this,
had
they had
provided.
to
We will
shit
provide that
canned
to you. On the
after he
contracts, that's a
failed
much more
like
complicated
multiple
question. And
background
that's
checks.
something that we're
Rob
looking
Porter or
into.
something like that.
How many
Isn't it because
of
he
the
beat up
Appendix
his
A individuals
girlfriend or his
currently
wife or
maintain
both
business
of them? I
arrangements,
don't even
contracts, or
know.
other
But I'm
consulting
telling you right now,
element
you
of the
better
U.S.
do some
intelligence
house cleaning
community?
of your
And
own,
that was as of
motherfucker.
May
Start with
31st,
your own dick.
2023.
Look at your
And
shorts
move
and
that
go
forward
from
to
there.
today, both of those last two questions. How many of those people, of those 51, had the arrangements in October of 2020, and how many of them have any contacts today? Could you get that information for us?
No.
I don't have that information now,
No.
but we will look to provide it to you.
No, don't.
So
Don't
let's
do
talk
it.
about this particular
Don't give him
topic.
anything.
Senator
doesn't
Rubio
deserve it.
was asking the question about who's going to stand up and look in the camera and say this is baloney. And that's going to
She
be
just
you.
told
I think
you.
you said that's the high responsibility that you
Yeah,
have.
she just
And
fucking told you that.
was
Are
in
you
the
listening?
context
Open your
of,
ears.
foreign
Open your
interference
ears,
in an
Blanche.
election. What about this sort of thing, where it's domestic interference that's obviously false? Who's got the responsibility for standing up and looking in the camera and
Yeah,
saying,
well,
folks,
so
don't
look
count
to
on
your
this, it's not
right,
true. Is that going to be your responsibility?
and you'll see this fucking dinosaur.
Sir, I think, look, my responsibility with respect to
motherfucker.
reformers that speak out and provide the wealth of their experience and knowledge in such circumstances is not to determine what they should or shouldn't say, but rather to ensure that they're not disclosing classified information, that we're protecting
arguing
that and
dick.
dealing with that. It's not, yeah.
What if it's false and they're using their
What if
robes
it's
of
not?
their
What if when it's not, would
having
you
knowledge
eat my
of,
hand?
security matters and
Because I'll put
intelligence
some
matters,
ketchup on
and
it
you
for
know
you,
it's
bitch.
false. Is that your response, or do you just say, no, I'm not going to get involved in that?
I don't understand, because I think, first of all, I think they said that their experience makes them deeply suspicious of that activity, right? And I wouldn't.
They went a little farther than
Yeah.
that, I think, but I'll take your
Why don't you shut up and let her finish?
And if you know that's false and you come into the information that it's false, is it your obligation or not your obligation to stand up, look in the camera and say, folks, when you're voting, don't take this into account?
Excuse me?
Sarah, I don't think I could even, frankly, make sure that I've
understand what
read
the
everything
fuck your
that the
question
former
is.
might have
That's
said
what she's
or
gonna
that
say.
anybody else has on these issues. So no, I don't think that it's appropriate for me to be determining what is truth and what is false in such circumstances. And
But what if you know?
yeah,
I mean, you're
Sir, I'm
sitting
not
you're
here
the
to
Senate
answer your
Intelligence
hypothetical,
America
bitch.
right there, and this has come out,
Not
and you know
here
it's false.
for
What's
it.
your obligation, or do you have any?
I think my obligation is to ensure that the best intelligence is
That's
being
right.
provided to
Stick to the
the
script,
president,
babes.
to the federal government, to the Congress, and where possible to the American people through declassifications,
But not-
which we would do.
Not calling out someone who stands
Don't
up
let
and
him
purports to have
distract
intelligence
you,
information
darling.
that you know is false.
Don't listen to the man. Don't.
If I were to, first of all, I'm not sure I'm the
Persist.
best arbiter of what is true and false. And
Let's
secondly,
say in a particular
Persist.
instance, you've seen the paper, you know it's false. Let's take that instance.
Tell him to
What do
no.
you do?
Say, I'm not going to answer your hypothetical.
it
Good
depends on the
night.
situation. If we're talking about a fake video
Situation
that's
is
been
just what I
put
said.
forward.
Somebody
right,
with
then,
intelligence
yeah.
credentials stands up and says, I know this from an intelligence standpoint, and you know, as the director of national intelligence, that it's false.
No,
what
I do not.
you do?
I do not consider that to be part of my responsibility. If there is
you're not-
disinformation that is put forward, false information, right, then we have the capacity to authenticate it or to identify it as
Exactly.
false. We will do so basically to
That's
our
right.
customers.
Don't
and there
let
will be a
him
process
fucking
whereby
gaslight
determinations are
you.
made,
He's
and
a
it may
horrible
not be-
gaslighter.
It may be to the public, but it might be classified information. It might be anything else. I don't know. under the
time's up,
circumstances,
and
too
I'm
much
not
of a
making
hypothetical.
progress, so I'm going to give it back to you.
Well, I just.
Because you're a fucking idiot.
We ought to continue to pursue this. I mean, my sense that would probably be the.
Okay, I can't stand it when he
responsibility of the
equivocates.
FBI if there was
I really fucking
proven.
can't,
I'm not
okay?
sure we
I fucking
want
can't stand it when you
Director
do
of
that.
National Intelligence commenting about a domestic statement made by an American. But I understand your point. I mean, I think that.
Well, that's the purpose of this hearing, is to find out how American voters are going to be kept
But although
informed of what's true and what's false.
it is, although the purpose, our purview at least, is
That wasn't your question.
focused on that foreign influence. But I understand.
No, he was trying to
Senator Kennedy.
equivocate two things that aren't equivocal.
Following up on this point, it seems to me the tension here is, I don't want the U.S. government to be the truth police. If you start talking about
great.
what's true
Here
and
we
what's not
go.
true in political advertising,
Fucking, I want
you
it.
know, you could have 1,000
I
people
want
doing
it
that full-time, 24 hours a day. That's not the job of
always.
the U.S.
Tell me why
It strikes me
I
that
like
the
to
role
vote
you can play, however,
Republican.
is disclosure
Tell
of
me why
sources.
I then
That
don't
if
vote
you
the
know through your intelligence
Democrat.
sources and your
Tell me
attribution
why
that a
I
particular
want
piece of information, true or not, is
attention.
coming from a
So
foreign
I'll
source,
be
that's the role where it's important for you to
independent.
notify the public
Fucking
so they know
this
the
guy.
source.
I
Not
lived
whether
in
it's
Maine,
true or not,
okay?
because I just think that's an impossible determination. But at least people should know the source. In a Maine town meeting, when somebody stands up to talk, you assess not only what they say, but who they are, and you're not allowed to
Yeah,
wear a
if you
badge
know,
over
you're
your
talking to
head at a
Joe
Maine
from
town
the
meeting.
Grange and he's just shot a
And
a
so
four
that's where
point,
I think you have an
and you
important
know,
role
he
to
has a
play.
question about
And
the
thing that
election.
bothers
Well,
me
then
in
you
words,
just
you use the
agree to
word notification
disagree.
framework. I've seen that.
Fuck you,
It's a
Angus.
bureaucratic nightmare. A
You're a
notification that
bureaucratic
comes in February
nightmare.
after a November election ain't any good. And what I want to urge is disclosure of sources when you're aware of it immediately. Immediately. Mark Twain said it, you know, it takes good news, bad news gets around the world
Almost froze to death in
before good news gets its
Maine.
shoes tied.
That's a song, Badger.
So I hope that
I
you can
really
go back and
hope
look
I
at this
still
process and
have
not
a
make it bureaucratic.
brain.
But if you
It's
have
goddamn
evidence that this
fucking
is coming
cold
from a
up
foreign
there.
source, let the
I
public
guess
know so
they
they can
really
assess
just
that.
don't
Is
care
that something you can take back?
about.
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
I
And that is something that we do, is
freeze
try and
to
attribute where
death.
information is coming from, essentially, and working through the methodologies
Yeah, it's
on
cold.
that. And I realize
I know.
notification
I know
framework
that.
may sound quite bureaucratic,
familiar.
but it really is a living thing. And for example, they have worked through a process where they can expedite their decision-making process through within 48 hours. They can, looking at
That should
even
be the
making
standard.
that
48
smaller
hours should be the
across the
outside.
board. Yeah, it's not much
Because-
longer than that in
Because
terms
having
of the
this
standard.
information that it's foreign sourced within the US government doesn't do us any good if the election is 5 days away and you don't get that information
Yeah,
out to the
absolutely.
public.
Agreed.
Because what's going on here is our adversaries are using our strength against us. It's a kind of geopolitical jujitsu. The strength of our society is its openness, the First Amendment, freedom of expression. They're using that in order to manipulate our most fundamental sacred right, which is the right of an election. And so we've got to be alert to it. And as I say, I disagree with my colleague. I don't think you're in the truth or falsehood business. I think you're in the disclosure of intelligence business. And I hope that that's something you can continue. Now, at CISA, I'm worried that you may be overly
Finally said
concerned with
something
appearing
made
partisan
sense.
and that will freeze you in terms of taking the actions that are necessary. You gave a very impressive list of all the meetings and
Sweet
things that
dragon, thanks.
you're doing.
Good
But I'm
Liars
hearing from
Late. It
some
started
election
about
officials
20
that they
minutes,
don't
50
feel that
seconds.
CISA
Thank
is out there with
you.
them. They're not getting the support that they need. So I hope that you're being very forward-leaning about the work that the protection you can provide to state and local election officials.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Actually, as I mentioned, we are providing more services in more jurisdictions than ever before. We've actually enhanced our field force of cybersecurity advisors, physical security advisors, and then election security advisors who are former secretaries of state
Thank you
or
to the
state
person who
election
just donated.
directors
That's very
who are
nice of
working
you.
hand in
Thank you,
hand
thank
with
you, thank
secretaries
you.
of state
You're
and
so
current
kind.
state election directors. And I
to
am
see
in
you,
touch with
Dragon.
chief election officials across the country, to include Secretary of State Bellows, and others to ensure that they are getting everything that they need to run safe and secure elections. And that's not been
I'd like to
affected
tell a couple
in
things to
any of a
Manafort.
partisan way.
Please ramp it up. We've got about 6 months, and this is
Please ram it.
We know that
I
these
heard him say
adversaries
it.
are going to be coming at us.
I heard him say it.
Final question. We know that in
Easily.
2016 and I believe in 2018, the Russians got into something like 35 states' election infrastructure. They didn't do anything with it. There was no effort to manipulate voting lists, but they weren't doing it for fun. I'm worried that they're still there and that the potential for example, people walking into a polling place in Miami and finding their name has disappeared off the list, the potential for chaos is very high. So I hope all of you are pursuing those.
Yeah, no, they're just sitting there painting their fucking nails, Angus. That's what they're doing all fucking day long. Painting their
I'll
nails,
just comment that since
comparing their
we have
Temu
designated
hauls. That's
election
all they're
infrastructure
doing
as
over
critical,
there.
there's been
Fuck
enormous
off.
progress, in particular in raising the bar on cybersecurity. So as you know, not all of voting equipment, vote tabulation and vote casting is not connected to the internet, just vote registration
Sharing
and election
Instagram
night
stories,
reporting.
you know,
So
the
that's,
usual.
the fact that it's disconnected, it's not exposed to the internet, that's a layer of security. But there are also multiple layers. Election officials take a defense in-depth approach, technological
Angus.
layers, physical
Sorry.
layers,
Sorry to all
procedural
the Angus
controls
fans.
to
I don't mean
ensure
to
that
totally
election
destroy him.
infrastructure is secure and
He's
resilient. The
an
other
easy
thing
target.
that's important to remember, Senator, is that we have so much diversity across our election infrastructure. If you've seen one state,
It's a benefit.
it's a benefit. If you've seen one state's election, you've seen one state's election. And so the virtue is there are procedures and controls under the chief election officials that makes that election equipment secure. And having worked with folks like Secretary of State McCrane in Idaho, I know that all election officials
That's
are focused
crazy.
laser-like
Venom milk.
on this, and they don't see elections security as a partisan
grape.
political issue. They see it as an issue of ensuring that they can enable every one of their citizens' votes to be counted as cast.
Final quick question. Director Haynes, did you hear about the 3 conspiracy theorists that walked into a bar? No. It
No.
wasn't a coincidence.
Oh my God, he's been waiting his entire career to say that joke.
Well, thank you for the good news. Director Haynes, you said we're never been better prepared. Ms. Easterly, you said our elections have never been more
Hey, it's Corny Cornyn.
secure.
Wait a
I
minute.
think that's good news.
Hey, whoa. Ooh, I'm sorry.
I've been involved in my career and observed as a citizen have never been exemplars of truth-telling. They are political contests for the hearts and minds of the voters and hopefully the ballot cast by that voter. And I frankly don't think it makes a whole lot of difference if it's some message is generated by some computer code or algorithm or artificial intelligence or a human being that is not telling the truth. Or
He's
some
not saying
third
anything
party,
worthwhile,
like
don't
these
worry.
51 intelligence officials who basically shared in a lie, attributing certain information in election to Russian disinformation. I actually found also, Ms. Easterly, I found this statement in your statement to be reassuring. You said, our election infrastructure is diverse, managed locally by state and local government offices to meet their unique jurisdictional requirements, and involves in-depth layers of defense and redundancies to ensure security and resilience. It is because of these measures and the incredible efforts of election workers across the country that the American people can have confidence in the security of our elections process. Again, more good news. As I read that, though, it seems to suggest that the distributed nature of our election system is actually a strength against attempts to disrupt our election process. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So any attempt by federal officials here in Washington, D.C. to centralize or concentrate that election authority would seem to me to run counter to that distributed structure which is providing some defense against attempts to disrupt or interfere with our elections. That's my observation, not necessarily yours. So I was very encouraged to see that the work you've done with chief election officials in places like Texas and elsewhere, the training, the assessments, the resources you provided have been successful and led you to believe that we have never been more secure. Let me ask you, maybe Ms. Knapp, I don't know who should take this question, but one of the biggest challenges we've had when it comes to elections or cyber attacks basically have been attribution. How do we know what the source of some of this information or
I just wrote
cyber
another
attacks,
song.
let's say?
I just wrote another song.
How do we know who it is?
I just wrote another song. Yeah, I did
Thank
see
you
it
for that
about
question,
that
sir. I can certainly
Texas
start,
bridge.
and then
I'm
I'm sure my
so
colleagues
sorry.
would love to jump in.
I didn't get the whole
As you had mentioned, sir,
I didn't get the whole
attribution is a
detail of
difficult
that, but
thing,
yeah, I
but
have to
it is
take a
not
look at
something
that.
that is impossible, and it takes time. So for us, from an FBI perspective, that would involve us tracing the origin. We would gather all available intelligence. We would serve legal process. It's an iterative process.
So that's not something you could do in real time, let's say against the deadline or backdrop of an election date.
Well, it would depend. It would depend on how easy it is to have attribution. It would also depend on what sort of available intelligence is out there driving us to come to whatever conclusion. But I don't know if any of my colleagues want to jump in on this.
And Ms. Director Haynes, does the U.S. government do anything to impose costs against those who engage in this misconduct?
I mean, obviously, that's a policy question, but yes, obviously, there have been actions that have been taken,
Well,
sanctions
It
or
may be a
other-
policy question, but you would know.
Yeah, fair enough. No. I mean, I think, sanctions are an example of the kinds of actions that have been taken, PNGing, other actions depending on the particular scenario. And we've also seen, as we've been helping, for example, Europe look at Russian efforts to influence the European Parliament elections, they've been taking certain actions in response to some of those influence operations. So I do think there are, in fact, tools that can be used, and others may wish to join.
Okay,
I just have
another
17
song.
seconds left. Let me change the subject a little bit. We've talked about virtual threats to election integrity, but not physical threats from terrorist groups.
She's ready to
Director
slay
Haynes, you said in
the
your annual threat
goofball. She
assessment you were
thinks
willing to acknowledge
their
that
life
perceptions of
became
immigration
true.
policies are driving
Ask Eastman and Clark
record numbers of
while
illegal
they're
immigrants
picking
across
up.
their borders.
Wait, while they pick
Director
up
Haynes also
poo.
talked about the
Look out,
ISIS
fascist
affiliated individuals who are
liars.
facilitating
She's
the passage
coming
of
for
migrants to the
you.
U.S.-Mexican border and into the United States.
Bop.
Can you tell us in open session how many illegal immigrants have ties to ISIS operatives? And does the IC assess
Well,
that
bridges
individuals
generally
with
go
those
over water,
connections have
so
entered the United
probably
States
not.
through the southern border, as Director Ray has testified?
Sorry, I know.
I can support what
I don't
Director
know.
Ray has
I heard
testified
there
to
weren't really
publicly,
any
but I
connections
can't
between the
answer your
causes of each,
specific
but I don't know
questions in
that.
open session, but we can obviously have further
You
discussions.
can't tell us what he told us.
No,
which
corny
is
cornin. She can't.
ISIS facilitators
Get off it,
have
corny.
managed
Get
to,
off it, corny.
deliver
She
people
already
to the
told you
southern
she can't
border,
tell you.
and they are likely
Listen,
been
champ.
released into the United States.
There is a facilitation.
Wow, I just
network
wrote a
that we have
Democracy
been
Dino
monitoring,
thingamabobber. That's so
obviously,
cool.
that has some links to ISIS, and that is something that we have been managing, but I can't go further into detail on that without being in closed session, sir.
Well, I think we are looking at a matter of when, if not if, we're going to have to live with the consequences of that.
Two quick comments before we go to Senator Bennett. One, I do think as policymakers, and I think there have been times in the past when we have punched back against some of those who try to interfere, and I think we ought to do more of that and try to urge as policymakers that action. And I would also say I want to commend, some of this part you made with Jen about the decentralized nature. I want to applaud Texas, which in an overwhelming way, I think almost unanimous in your state house and 75%, I think, in your state senate, approved legislation that the governor Abbott signed prohibiting deep fakes of political candidates. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Gosh, you're just like full of compliments for everybody today,
Thank you,
aren't
Mr.
you?
Chairman. Thanks for holding
Aren't you?
this hearing. It's a tough set of issues because we live in a free society. We're all, one way or another, I think, we're all trying to help strengthen this democracy, help strengthen
In one way or
the
another?
values that we
Which
all
way are you helping?
that we share, and we're under assault, in a way that we've never been before from our adversaries. And they're, I think, we've got competing values at stake here, the First Amendment.
I
on
don't
the
know.
one
I didn't
hand,
hear the
protecting
details
our
of this
national
morning's
security
crash,
on the other
unfortunately, because
hand.
it kind of came
I
on
was
right as I was
reading
going live on
Director
the other.
Haynes, the
So I don't know.
piece
I need
in
to look into
Wired
it.
last
But I
week
just
about
briefly caught
the Russian
Steve,
disinformation
what's his
campaign,
name?
the doppelganger
Agenda Free.
operation, the
Guys, breaking news,
Kremlin-backed
breaking news.
operation that
So I caught
promoted
him
a
and he
fake
made that
Washington
comment.
Post
So that's all I
article that
really
said
know.
that
I should look into it before I say anything
billionaire
else.
Soros was hiring people at $30 for anti-Semitism.
Yes, George Soros, the fossil
and this
who
site looked just
runs
like
the
the
Open
Washington
Society
Post,
Institute, which I almost got a job with, but
people
you know what
in
else? Their
this
pay is
country
really
that
shitty.
were
Okay,
having
so
protests
George
in the
Soros might
United
be trying to
States,
run the world, but he's doing it
were
with a
basically
pretty
being attacked in
basic,
a sense by
very
this
complicated
propaganda, by
foundation,
this,
which is actually really
by this effort
does
to
some pretty good
divide
work.
us. And
And
these
I've always
guys
liked them.
working, I think,
But
with
they
the Russians that
definitely
fabricated
are
articles from Le Monde
stingy when it comes
and
to money.
Fox
So
News
I'm
as
going to say
well.
right now that I don't
And
think
I
George
just wonder
Soros
if
is
you could
throwing
talk
money
a little
around
bit
anywhere. I
about
think he's
the
very
speed,
cautious.
and that's not an election issue. That's a
Well, and
democracy
actually,
issue.
I'm
This is a
not even
debate
sure
that's
George
going on in the
Soros gives a
streets of
flying
this
fuck
country
what's
and
happening at
the
Open
streets of
Society
free
Institute. I don't
countries
know.
all
I'm going
over
to
the
guess
world
that. I'm going to guess
that
George
our
Soros is more
totalitarian
worried about the temperature of his
adversaries are
oatmeal
using to try to
than he is
incite
about,
divisions, incite
whether or
discord,
not
to take the temperature up
a
based
DA
on
in,
information that isn't true. And somehow we
Gannett
have to find a
County
way
is
as a free
being,
society to
I mean,
respond
I
to
just
that.
don't
And
think
it
that's
seems
what
to me
George
that
Soros
the
is spending
first
his time worrying
part of
about.
that
I
is
don't
to
know,
help
but I'm
notify
guessing. He's got a
people
lot of people
in
that
real
work for
time
him
when
that,
this kind of thing is happening, when
I don't
the
know.
country as a
I
whole
don't know.
is subject to this sort of intentional misinformation that we're seeing, frankly, throughout Europe, I mean, we've seen it in the most devastating way in Myanmar, where there was people were killed as a result of the content that was being
I mean, that is
purposely
the play, right? It's just
disseminated
anti-Semitism.
over
It,
social media
and
platforms there. And
I don't know. It's
I
just
think
like,
we would be naive to think that that level
I was
of
almost
political
surprised to
violence
hear
couldn't
them
also
resurrect his
occur
name
here
because he
as
just
well.
really doesn't
So
have
I guess
anything
the
to
first
do
question
with
I would
what's
ask
going.
is,
I
what
mean,
are we going to do about it?
I'm guessing. He just doesn't have anything to do with what happens
Well,
with
I
his
do
money.
think
His money
that
is just like
one
the Chan
aspect of
Zuckerberg
what you do about it is
Institute.
basically
The Chan
expose
Zuckerberg
what
Institute
the
is run
tactics
by a
are
bunch
and
of
what
program
we're seeing,
directors
and then
and a
address
board,
specific issues as they come aboard,
and
just as
there's
you've been
all
saying.
kinds of
And
bureaucracy.
we have
I've
been
gone
looking
for
and
a
increasingly
CZI
working with
grant.
partners
It's
and
fucking
allies, frankly,
brutal.
around the world to do exactly
You have to
that,
really
because
know
it
your
is better to
shit.
do it in numbers, in effect, and to
So,
really get the message out
stop
in
telling me
ways
that this is some kind of
people
like
find increasingly credible in
undermining
targeting
of
that disinformation.
like
There's also
whatever.
going
It's
after,
not,
and this is part
okay?
of,
They're just boring
I
old
think what you were
grants that are really
describing.
fucking
There's
hard to
going
get.
after the sort of
And I'll tell you,
the
they watch
platforms
every
that
penny
get used in
you
this context.
spend.
So, Russia has been pretty
Yeah.
extraordinary in
Oh,
terms
it will.
of the
It'll
platform
disrupt
that
Summer
they've
Islanders.
built
Oh.
for their work. They essentially have a
Yeah, it's
state-run
just terrible.
propaganda
I'm so
machine,
done with all
right,
this.
that is
Why
comprised
are
of
we so
domestic media
broken?
apparatus, outlets targeting global audiences such as RT and Sputnik, and
Yeah.
a network of kind of quasi-government trolls.
I had to
that
argue
are
with a
used.
chud the
And
other day that
over the
RT
years, the
is an
apparatus has
actual
grown.
propaganda
It's,
arm of
broadening
the
array
GRU, of the
influence
Russian.
actors, the
I mean,
tactics
just
that they
come on.
use,
That's not even
for
controversial
covert and
anymore.
deniable
Come on. That's
operations.
not
And they're
controversial.
trying, as you
It's
indicated,
not.
to shape U.S. political discourse, European political discourse, to reduce support for Ukraine, other things. And part of what we're seeing is their capacity to use some of the platforms that they've chosen are getting harder as we're getting better at disclosing
Oh
how
yeah,
those
sorry.
platforms are
I have
being
not
used
been
and
able to
how
catch up
countries are
too
taking
on
action to
what's happening in
pull
Georgia
broadcasting
today.
licenses, other things along those
Nor
lines
have
in
I
order
caught
to
up, although
actually
I believe
make it more challenging.
the
They obviously look
Slovakian
for
prime
other
minister
opportunities
has
and can get around
survived
these things,
his
but that is
assassination
among
attempt.
some of the sort of opportunities
Oh my
for
God, that made me sneeze.
battling it, I'd say, for others. Yeah.
I might just add something to your question insofar as it relates directly to elections. And we have a great relationship with Secretary of State Griswold and Judd Choate, your election director, who are very, very focused on this issue. But if you look at two very powerful examples, again, at the state level, where this may actually happen, one focused on being prepared, the other focused on a very effective response. So in Arizona, Secretary of State Adrian Fontes has been working with his local election officials to do a series of tabletop exercises
the
with
Arizona
deepfakes of him in the day before the election to prepare them to be able to respond and to be able to communicate. And he's brought in local media and the community to help them understand these kinds of threats. And again, to
media
lay the ground
literacy.
to inoculate them
That's
from
media
being
literacy
influenced,
right
because
there.
of course those could be amplified
That's
by
what that
foreign
is.
malign
That's how we
influence
get to be
actors.
better.
The other very good example, I think, was the robocall that happened in New Hampshire 2 days before the primary election. When that happened, the Attorney General, John Formella, came out with a very clear statement saying that it is likely criminal behavior, saying that it's being investigated and that it should be ignored as an example of repression of the vote. And then the Secretary of State, Dave Scanlon, came out. He amplified that on a whole bunch of media platforms to get that message out to all of the constituents, and then said at the end of the day, the turnout was actually higher than he expected. So election officials, who are the ones running and securing these elections, are out there ensuring that they can prepare, and I think we have good examples of how they're actually able to react to it, sir.
I know. Thank you very much, and thank you both for your testimony. I know I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman, but if I could just finish with one thought. Those are two great examples in Arizona.
I
and New Hampshire,
will.
where
I know I
local
haven't even had a
officials
chance,
whose-
but I've
who
been
have
going
sworn
since
an
7.
oath to the
But I will
Constitution
definitely do
are
that.
fulfilling that oath. Director Haynes had good examples of what we're doing with trying to do with foreign actors that are associated with the Kremlin. That's good too. Mr. Chairman, we still have the problem of our own platforms, these platforms in the United States of America, who have not taken the kind of responsibility they need to be able to deal with these challenges as well, who have not kept on the people that they, in theory, hired to
I just want
do
to see how
the
many messages
content
I've missed
moderation
in Signal
work that they were gonna
from this
do, who
morning.
have not been willing to think about slowing down the degree to which information is shared across the planet Earth that goes through their
That's
network.
a
So
lot
I
of
just think we've
messages.
got a responsibility of our own here in terms of oversight to make sure
We're
they're
going
doing what's
to
required
have,
as
we're
well.
going to have that kind of hearing with the social media companies and to the
Are we?
ever
Oh,
patient
I would
and
like to look.
7-minute time.
I would like to see
Senator
that.
Langford.
I'll take that. Thank you. Thanks, y'all, for your testimony. You were just speaking to Senator Bennett about Russia and some of the influence that they have targeted and the ways that they're doing it. Can we switch sides and actually talk about China? What is China doing currently to try to influence United States public opinion?
Yeah, if it's all right with you, sir, I'll mention what they're doing here, but also what they're doing abroad, because we're seeing it on a broad range of things. I think they're growing, we assess, really increasingly confident in their ability to influence elections, but remain concerned about the possibility of blowback should they be discovered. And the PRC has made improvements to its influence operation tools using artificial intelligence, big data analytics. Their tactics globally include bankrolling candidates they prefer, using deepfake technologies to generate content, collecting polling data to determine targets for them, conducting social media influence operations. For example, the PLA will take over and operate social media accounts on a number of different platforms. We look to disclose that and tell companies about that when it happens to promote disinformation across the board. And they also target their diasporas, and we've seen them obviously seek to influence elections not only in the United States in the context of congressional candidates. Generally, this has been one of the things in different levels and spaces, but also elections in Taiwan, in Australia, and in Canada, so a pretty significant portion.
How do we expose that? How do we put the word attributions to challengers we've already talked about already? Once it starts to get out there on social media and other places, how is that exposed most effectively if it's discovered on the federal side?
start, but I think my colleagues may wish to amplify certain aspects of this. I mean, we obviously put in our annual threat assessment some of the things that we're seeing the PRC engage in terms of influence operations, including in these spaces. And when we get intelligence that indicates that the PRC is, for example, taking on social media accounts or things like that in a platform, we then pass that information through. The FBI is able to provide that to the companies to take action if they.
A general statement, if they're going to do it, is different than an example to say, here's an example of a post that we know was created by or was amplified by China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, whatever it may be. 2016 and 2017, we're able to pull exact examples and to be able to list them, post them, and say, this was Russian created. Here's where it started, here's where it came from, and to be able to expose it. How do we do that now as we're approaching this election and foreign actors are trying to influence?
We will do just that. So essentially the same playbook in that sense that we are identifying specific credible intelligence, we are passing that to the companies or exposing it publicly as the case may determine.
Okay, let me keep going because I'll be limited in time, though I have mercifully 7 minutes to be able to walk through this, but I'll still run out of time on this. Since we passed the Help America's Vote Act, HAVA, as it's all called at this point, there's been perpetual funding that's been sent out to multiple states to be able to improve their systems. It's been interesting. I pulled new numbers because every state says we can't improve our election systems. We don't have enough money on it. So we pulled the recent spending and what people have and what they haven't spent already. Colorado, my colleague Senator Bennett just left, has received $15 million, has only spent 27% of that money. Hawaii has received $8 million, has spent 26% of it. Louisiana has received $14.5 million and has spent 0 of that so far. Maryland, $17 million, has spent 37%. Minnesota, $16 million, has spent 41%. Not to leave my own state out, Oklahoma has received $11 million. We've spent 23% of that. Now, other states have spent more on it, but this money has been sitting there for years. This is not money that was allocated 3 months ago. Quite a bit of this funding was allocated to them years ago, and they have not actually spent it. So my question
where
is,
I'll go because
Cecilia,
I
on this,
shot my
how do we
wad
encourage states
and
to
it
be able to up their
didn't
game
work.
on
I'm
a couple of
such
areas?
a
One is
jerk.
learning the lesson
I
of the
should
unofficial
have
results
just
in their
followed
own
the
websites and how to be able to
crowd.
protect
Oh
those
my
systems.
God.
That's an
What am
obvious
I?
area of
I'm a
creating
fucking
distrust on election
Rogers
night
and
of those
Hart
who
over
actually
here.
interfered
What
with.
the
The
fuck?
second one is old school paper ballot backups. So if there's a problem with the
Oklahoma,
machine,
where I'll
everybody can
go.
verify it with a piece of paper. When we have states that have literally
When
millions
my
of
work
dollars
here
sitting
is
there saying we don't have enough to
done.
be able to do this, when most of them do, how do we advance this?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Senator. So I can't speak to those
It will
statistics, and I'm
be
happy
so
to follow up on that. But I
sweet.
will say what we provide as the Sector Risk Management Agency are
Nope.
no-cost
I,
services
I,
and
I
no-cost
pushed it. I
training.
pushed it too
So
far.
many of the
Damn it.
states, in fact, thousands of jurisdictions take advantage of the cybersecurity assessments, the free cyber hygiene scanning we provide.
Hi, 40
the
viewers,
endpoint
everybody on
detection and
Twitter,
response
everybody
that we
wave
have,
from the
malicious
lounge over
domain
on
blocking.
YouTube. Wave over
So
to
all of
everybody on
that,
Twitter.
is in
Woo,
place
everybody
across
at
the
Real
country.
Lolo on YouTube.
So I know they're taking
Click the
advantage of
link.
that, and that has significantly raised the bar from a cybersecurity perspective. I think your points about election night reporting are very good ones. One of the things that I think it's really important for everyone to remember is that those are all unofficial results, right? And they need to be canvassed, and they need to be certified, which takes
Lee
days
says,
to
hi,
weeks.
Twitter.
But if it's announced on election night who won,
You know what's
and then
interesting,
a week later,
Mr.
the
Langford,
state announces,
is that
oops,
sometimes
no, a different person won,
something
that
happens, okay?
shows incredible
Shit for
distrust.
brains.
I agree.
That's what I'm
Where
going to call
now
you.
no
I'm going to
one
call you
trusts
shit
the
for brains.
election results
Here's the
anymore.
problem.
And
You
while the
guys are the
election
ones
results
that
were
planted those
unofficial,
seeds.
if those are
You,
interfered with, that's a real
you're the
vulnerability
drama.
to building trust among
You're the drama, not us.
I agree with that.
Not
sir.
us.
As I said in my opening
Own
statement,
him.
you know, these systems are more secure than ever before. And election officials, to include Paul Zierex, who's your state election director, are terrific, are working incredibly hard to make sure that every one of their citizens' votes are counted as cast. And I think it's really important that we focus on them because they're the true election experts, and we listen to their voices and what they say. And so I would hope that anybody who is providing unofficial results would make sure that that state election director gets a voice in that to say, it's not canvassed, it's not certified yet, so let's wait until it's certified.
Okay, thank you.
Don't
Chairman, I'm just gonna
create.
ask a
You're the
follow-up question on
drama.
this, and then, have it
You,
done.
not
Is that,
you.
as far as
You.
the FBI and
You are
U.S.
the
Attorney's
drama.
Office is following up
Mr.
on a
Langford.
criminal
You.
offense of voting if
Drama
you're not
llama.
legally present in the
Drama
country
llama
and you're voting in a
Langford.
federal election, that is a federal crime. What I'd love to be able to know,
from
I've
now on.
not been able to get
Drama
the
llama
statistic on is how many prosecutions do we have across the country for a
Drama
federal
llama
election crime? Is that actually being followed up on? Do we have a good number of both charges being filed and actual prosecutions on that for a federal election crime? I know in my state, we talked about Paul Xerox, in my state and what our district attorneys are doing in the state. If someone votes twice or whatever it may be, the prosecution's there and they have a good
Good one,
history on that.
Teresa.
I don't know on the federal side. Can y'all provide that to me?
Sir, thank you very much for the question. What I do have in front of me right now is how many cases have been charged through the Department of Justice Task Force on Election Security. What I don't have is that second part, but I can at least give you a general number right now. So right now, the task force has charged
Chris
17
Ray there?
cases
Why is
with a
this
resulting
poor
13
woman having to
convictions.
do Chris
But
Ray's
with
job
respect
today?
to your subset question, I'm
I hope
happy
she
to
gets
take
a
that back to my
differential.
team and get you a more complete
Honey,
answer.
go get that differential. Get it.
I think those
Get it.
those
Get
HAVA
it.
numbers
Get
are
it.
pretty
Get the paper.
remarkable.
Get the
I'm glad you
differential.
shared those.
Some states
Are
have
you
spent
telling me that
70,
is a good
80%
point?
of them. Quite a few of our states have spent 50% or less on the HAVA numbers, and these are the most
Are
recent
you,
from just a couple of
are you
months ago.
telling me you did a good job of that question?
I do think, I mean, and on your question about how many federal violations, I thought there was, I mean, something in that range. I thought after the 2000 election, I thought there was a canvas of that had a relatively small number, but I think that might have been both state and federal. Let me move to a slightly that is related to this. As I think, you know, we're talking about AI being all the buzz at this point, but I think the nefarious nature of some of our adversaries of using
Guys, can we talk about Rumble?
platforms. You know, the
How about
independent entities, Mandiant and Graphica, both
Can we
companies that are
talk about the
committees very
Epoch
familiar with and
Times?
that we've used, have
that?
reported that there are
How about that?
some of these gig employment companies, Freelancer and Fiverr are two that I think their reports indicated, where foreign governments are actually hiring unwittingly citizens in those countries, targeted countries, and then in effect paying them to be influence operators. And even more specifically, Cameo, which I think goes after celebrities, depending, I'm not sure whether they're A, B, or C list.
Go ahead and bring up
has
George Santos.
gone out
Go
and
ahead.
appeared to have, again, unwittingly enlisted celebrities to help on anti-Ukraine messaging. How are we thinking as we think about malicious use by foreign actors? You know, a couple years ago, we would not have thought that a gig platform would be a tool for that kind of foreign influence. Anybody on the panel want to take that one?
Or do you want it? Okay, all right, I'll start and we'll play in. But I think, first of all, you're absolutely right. I think one of the key trends that I identified were the use of commercial firms, and some of them are witting and some of them are unwitting in this space. And it's marketing firms, it's public relations firms, it's reputation management firms, it's gig firms, it's across the board. And they're increasingly being relied on to sort of launder covertly directed narratives through media sources and social media platforms. And this complicates, obviously, attribution, and this is something that we're trying to get better at in a faster way. But part of the reason that they're doing this, right, is because these firms tend to be more nimble than their own intelligence services and government apparatus, basically, for taking action. They're also frequently more sophisticated in their capacity to actually promote influence campaigns. And so this is one of the things that we're watching. And in 2020, just to give you a sense of the scale of this, these types of firms, we judge, were involved in information manipulation in at least 48 countries by our count. So it is really becoming increasingly widespread, and it's one of the challenges that we're trying to manage. And
But is that, but oh, go ahead, Jen.
I would only add, just last month, we actually worked with FBI and DNI to put out an advisory that very specifically highlights these tactics, to include using proxy media, laundering it through PR, whether witting or unwitting, how to recognize it, and then mitigations around how to actually deal with these types of things. And we're doing separate training on it as well. So part of this is the awareness of it at the election official level, and then what they need to do to mitigate it. Separately, though, the platforms is an issue, obviously,
You think that
needs to
Congress
be
could speak with one
addressed
voice
directly.
about this?
Sir, thank you for the
That's what
opportunity.
you'd think.
We are obviously, like my colleagues, absolutely concerned with any sort of technology that our adversary uses. What I can say in this setting is, when we have specific information on a particular company, we will directly engage with them. However, in absence of that, partnering with key partners like CISA and putting out the general awareness piece that allows companies to be more aware and more informed so they can mitigate that and spot it within their own systems.
Well, one of the things I would suggest that this committee, and Senator Rubio and I think have done fairly effectively, was doing a series of classified briefs by industry sector around the challenges of the PRC. This is more specific, but I would hope that the FBI or DOJ might update their FARA, the foreign agent
Seems to be
entities that makes
dancing
all this
around
activity illegal.
a few issues like responsibility for notification
ought to be
and
updated.
all kinds of weird
And I would
ignorance of
strongly
what
encourage,
exists already. It's kind of strange to me.
Some level of convening of these kind of platforms. Again, where do you draw the line? But if we have in open source documentation from Graphica and Mandiant, the fact that these platforms are being used and citizens are being unwittingly used. Now, whether the platforms are unwitting or not is maybe an open question, but if they realize that if they were wittingly
it's so
helping foreign agents
funny.
interfere,
In
that
a
would be a
rich man's
violation of the
world.
law. I think
FARA
that
is
would be a
in-country
helpful process. Thoughts on
influencers.
that?
Yeah.
My main thought is one of the really great things since 2020 that's
in
different
other words,
now, Chairman, is we have the FMIC, which we didn't have before, which allows for those classified briefings, and I'll defer to Avril, but I think that is very much added value.
I'll just say that I very much support the idea of getting the sector together and seeing whether or not we can enhance our capacity to get out to everybody essentially on these issues. So, absolutely.
I'm kind of
One
confused
thing,
as to why there isn't an ongoing task force to do that since the 2020 election. I am so, that seems like a no-brainer.
One thing I am
don't
concerned
know.
about, because I appreciate all of these, the comments of the outreach. that
How
CISA's
about
done, but,
looking at Ron Johnson?
You know, how do we,
How about him?
in an appropriately nonpartisan way, I've heard some reports that there are
Maybe.
not many, but a certain number of counties that are actually opting out of some of the voluntary tools that CISA has used in the past, like the Einstein system, where I thought for a long time we had literally a level of cyber protection down to county levels. But for whatever reason, certain counties are now opting out of that. I heard in Washington State. Is that kind of a one-off? Or I would just hate, as we get closer to the election, if the distrust of the federal government becomes such that people are literally turning away voluntary cyber and other educational protections.
Yeah, but the good news, Chairman, is that that's not accurate. The trend is actually states and local jurisdictions continue to take advantage of the no-cost voluntary services with respect to the Albert sensors in particular. There's
What's
Albert
glue?
Einstein,
What's
easily
glue
confused.
up
There's
to these
1,083
days?
sensors across the country. I think less than a handful, less than 5, have not renewed their contract, and that's for a variety of reasons, to include opting to use different technology for intrusion detection. So this is something we look at very closely, and I have
whose
no
technology?
concerns.
Because if it
You know,
came
at the
from
end of
Doug
the day,
Frank, don't do it.
As you know, Chairman, CISA is a nonpartisan, non-political agency, and we cannot be effective unless we can work with election officials at the state and local level of both parties. So I'm very attuned to that, and I have not seen any significant changes in our ability to provide no-cost services, information, and no-cost voluntary training to election jurisdictions across the nation.
Well, I am, again, turn to Senator Rubio for his closing comments, then I'll make one or two quick comments. You know, I think the whole system was shocked by 2016. And again, I think a lot of good work by this committee to point out the level of Russian interference, and I still remember.
Then why does no one know about the Mueller report?
I think we then took action in 2018. I think, and again, I have repeatedly said, I think under the Trump administration, we were very well prepared in 2020 because there was effective communication and
That's what I was going to say, Lee. What about Eric? What about the Eric
worry
system,
at
and who's
times
gotten rid of that?
in 2024, because of
A mood ring.
increasing distrust
What
of any
color?
governmental entity.
How about they all wear mood
I
rings?
worry in
That's right,
terms of
SB.
social media platforms that don't seem to even try to have their users adhere to their
I
own
mean,
standards.
we're
These are
having
not
this
government
conversation
standards,
about
they're their own
convening
standards.
the heads
I
of the social
worry
media
in
companies,
terms
and
of
it
some
is
of these
May
new AI
15th.
tools that can
It is May
operate at
15th,
speed and
before
scale
the
that's
election,
unprecedented.
less than 6 months.
And the fact that we've kind of all become a little bit almost immune
Less than 6 months.
to
And they are
these
having
statements,
this, yeah, maybe
mistruths,
it'd be a good
falsehoods.
idea to convene all the
share,
social media companies.
some of the concerns raised by a number of the members, Director Haynes,
What?
that we do need a
What?
kind of pre-assigned
feels
process,
like they're-
especially if
they're
we're getting into those
like-
last 30 days or last week or so before the election of who would report.
Gaslighting
I think
us
this
a
effort
little
today
bit.
that made the press, it probably is appropriate that the CIA itself responded. But as we get into those final days and weeks, having an approach, and again, citing the 2020 example where, in effect, everyone across the board came out and called out the Iranians for their action. We need to not be game time thinking that through with all of the potential forces that are coming to bear potentially on this election. Senator Rubio?
Really?
Good, just to wrap this all up. First of all, it's not, I haven't focused as much on the CISA role because to me, the technical aspects, it's not that it's easier technically, protecting elections from people that are professional hackers that are constantly trying to get into everything from water systems to election systems to hospital systems. I mean, these people are, this is what they do
Could
all
you
day.
speak up, Marco?
So I'm not in any way diminishing, but the importance and the difficulty of it, I am pointing out though that it's technical, right? It's a red state, a blue state, they're both going to be equally impacted. They both are fertile ground, especially when you get down at the congressional level and even the local elections. So the reason why I focus so much on election interference, influence, and in particular foreign
What about
malign
Doug Frank and
influences,
his
'cause that's a
traveling
lot
band
trickier.
of miscreants
just
who are telling people that they shouldn't
the
trust
threats,
the
I don't know where
election
this comes from. I
process?
think it's
What about that?
one of the assessment for foreign threats to 22. If you just go through this, you start to see one of the first things that it points out, which I think you see to this day, is that part of their effort is largely, some of these operators are largely focused on amplifying what are already authentic beliefs in American politics, right? So these are people already believe these things, and one of the things they do is they
This is
just
his
simply
soundbite
amplify
moment.
things that people are already saying. So what's the risk there? If you say that the Iranians or the Russians or the Chinese are amplifying a message, some people take that to mean if I believe in something that I've stood for a long
This is
time,
the man
all of a
who
sudden
helped,
now I'm a
push the
Chinese
big
agent,
lie.
or now I'm a Russian agent
Yeah.
because I'm actually saying things on the campaign trail.
Okay.
And so you see it, for example.
He's trying to
and it's also,
justify the big lie
Iran
right now. This
proposed,
is disinformation
helping
in action,
nationalist groups inside
kids.
the U.S. and Iranian
Kids.
officials advocated using covert
Map of
social
states
media
that have
to
left
pit
9
the
with
extremist groups
Raga,
against each other.
right. Oh, really?
Though more likely for use in 2024. This was written in 22. So obviously we're now in 24 and you see that.
Yeah.
So
So
that's
what
just
do
an
you
effort
think
to get
your
Americans
role
to
in
fight and make
was
us look
that?
weak internally.
What was your role,
Then the other thing
Marco?
is that in October of 22, Twitter exposed 3 separate Iranian-based influence networks operating on the platform, generally supporting left-leaning U.S. politicians, including a range of House and Senate candidates. And according to industry reports, many exposed accounts espoused pro-Palestinian sentiments. At the same time, they expressed positive sentiments towards progressive candidates. Now you flip to the Russians. The Russians tried to denigrate the Democratic Party before the midterm and undermine confidence in the election, most likely to weaken U.S. support for Ukraine. So they denigrated the Democratic Party. They wanted, in particular, they amplified questions about whether U.S. aid to Ukraine would continue if the balance of power in Congress shifted. Their intent there is not that they're Republicans, but their intent there was to denigrate the Democratic Party because it furthered their aim, and in the process also begin to influence our willingness to continue to be committed to helping Ukraine. You move on to others, so another one that the Russians, blaming multiculturalism and leftist ideals for ostensibly driving the U.S. into a crisis. There are a lot of people that actually hold that view, irrespective of what the Russians believe. They're just amplifying what somebody's probably been saying for 15 years. That doesn't make that person a Russian agent. It just makes it more difficult on this. And then you have these unique cases, and this one in particular strikes home because I think I know who they're talking about. We assessed that Cuba attempted to undermine the electoral process of specific U.S. congressional politicians in 2022 that they perceive as hostile. They focused their operations aimed at denigrating specific U.S. candidates in Florida, although in an attempt to shape the impression of other politicians as well, because they view Cuban Americans in Miami as having an outsized influence on U.S. policy.
George handed it over to his son, so there's that.
To
Yep.
Cuba. So, and they also cultivated members of the U.S. media who held critical views of that member of Congress. So I probably know who they're talking about, but the point in it, obviously it was in 22, so where I happen to be on the ballot,
He's telling the truth about
among
this
others.
stuff, though.
But
He's just spinning it
the
slightly.
point being is that that's a very specific.
Yeah, no, I'm
aim.
not saying that
My
it's
whole
not
point
true,
in all of
but
this
he's
is
really
you have
trying
the
hard to make
example that
it
I
sound
used
like
about the fake
somehow
AI
he's on
debate.
the right side of
Okay,
history.
and that's almost, I don't say it's
And
an
that
easy
is just
question, but that's a more obvious one. It's
false.
clearly a fake video.
100%
and
false.
I think what we want to know is, do we have
That's
a
all.
formalized process to act very quickly to say, this thing is fake?
It's
Even if
the
we can't attribute it. You don't need to attribute it to be able, in the last days of a campaign, to at least protect the American people. And it has to be done in a way where the other side, who maybe hopes it's real, doesn't feel like you're tipping the
and
scales
I'm
in
not
favor
a
of your
fucking senator.
preferred
I didn't
candidate.
even go to law
To be
school. I
blunt,
didn't even go
let's
to
say a video comes
postgraduate.
out that's fake about Trump.
I
And the
just
DNI
went,
comes
no,
out and says,
I mean, I
this
didn't even
video
go,
is,
whatever it is.
it's not a fake.
Whatever's
or
after the
let me do it reverse.
bachelor's,
Somebody
I
comes
didn't do
out, a
it.
video that comes out about Biden.
And even I
And
know.
the DNI, yourself, or whoever's in charge of coming out with this says, this video is a fake. I can see where people on the Trump side would say, well, that's just because you're trying to help Biden. It's probably a real video. And the reverse would be true in a different scenario.
What?
So it's a hard thing to do, but
be
someone
really
has to be in
shitty
charge
if
of
he
coming
had no
forward, and at least saying it's
morals.
fake, even if we can't attribute it. That's the obvious questions. This one, the one I've just described about amplifying voices that are already out there in narratives, that's a lot tougher.
There you go.
I think the most we can say
Get
in
rid
that
of
regard
Elmo.
is, look,
Make him
we know
register.
that these countries are doing this. They're not doing it because they're Democrats or
They
Republicans.
need
It
Twitter.
serves some purpose, influencing Cuba policy.
The right wing
influencing Ukraine
needs Twitter.
policy,
They
make
need
America look chaotic, get groups
Elmo.
to fight against each other. But this is what they're doing, and let people make judgments as to how they take these narratives. It's tough.
No,
I don't have
okay,
an
we
easy
did
answer for how
that,
we fix
right?
it
We
or
did that.
What the process should look
Helped
like in
by
terms of
you
notifying
and your
people.
fucking
I just know that
asshole
this is going to
friends
get far more
who went
complex.
ahead and said,
And I
"Oh
predict
yeah,
it won't
what
just
he's
be about
saying,
elections.
yeah,
It will actually become in real
true.
time.
It's-
It already
it's not
is
untrue.
on policy debates.
There are a
that we're
lot of
having here.
concerns
Should we
about
have
the
tariffs?
2020 election.
Should we ban TikTok? Should we?
Oh my
you name it.
God,
On a
there's
weekly
so many-
basis,
there's-
whatever the issue is here, I can see this becoming part
It's a
of
trash heap.
an influence even in our daily political
Trash.
debates. So we
Utter
really need to get a handle on it.
trash.
It's a tough one, but we really need to because it's going to get far worse, far
No
more
shit,
sophisticated,
Sherlock.
with
Thanks
far
to
more-
you
many
and
more
your
players.
little
And I think
buddies.
pose a grave danger at some point of turning into something that we haven't fully anticipated. So I hope we can continue to work on finding a way forward because I'm sure they'll be talking about it at this dais after we're both gone. This will still be.
Shut up.
Thank you.
I agree with Senator Rubio. I think these are challenging, but I think the only thing that I would hope we both agree on is that, yeah, Americans have got plenty of differences between each. But if that amplification can literally be traced back to the Cuban spy services, and it is appearing that millions of Floridians are saying something that they're not really saying, I think the Floridians ought to know that that is not the case, that we can trace it back to the Cuban services, or we can trace it back that these individuals who are posting things anti-Ukraine are actually being paid by Russia. If that proof is there, some of these things would violate why I think the upgrading of the FARA bill, there are restrictions against foreign agents taking these kind of actions. So it is a challenge. Technology is going to make it much, much harder. This will not be the last time that we deal with this. And please, for all of the folks who are in the row supporting you and
Just
more
because
importantly,
it's
back at your
hard
respective agencies, we're going
Doesn't
to count
mean
on
you
you.
shouldn't do it. Just
this
means it's hard.
Truly is. We always say, politicians
more
always
zen
say,
about
particularly
it.
when they're up, this is the most important election ever. Even though neither one of us are
Everyone
up this time,
is.
this
Every
is the most
election is
election
important.
ever.
How about we start saying
We're
that?
adjourned.
How about that? All right? How about we start saying that? How about that's what we start saying? We start saying that every election is fucking important, because they are. And they are, every one of them is important because of the disinformation landscape that we live in. So that, ladies and gentlemen, he, she's, and theys, is really the fucking point. Someone in the media has to stand up every single time one of those morons comes on their program and say, disavow the lie right here, right now. And also start fucking pushing some legislation so that we have some kind of fairness doctrine in this fucking country, some attempt, because doing nothing is not the answer. And I am a person who believes so deeply in free speech that I can say that I don't think we're ever going to get rid of the Rumbles, the Epoch Times, the this, the that, and the other thing. But we can do a damn better job of labeling it as opinion. And then, in concert with that, full-throated, bipartisan response, we can have elementary schools and pedagogues start to create media literacy integration in curriculum. We can move away from Pearson as the provider of textbooks for our public schools and figure out a better provider for a diverse and rich and logical public education curricula that integrates media literacy, that integrates critical thinking, that integrates whole child, that integrates wraparound services, that integrates multicultural, that integrates multilingual, that integrates all of those fucking things, all the social, emotional, all of that. All of the individual education planning, all of that. But start now. And stop saying the phraseology that keeps us stuck here, right? It's almost like you can label what people are saying. Okay, they're in the phraseology right now. Okay, they're in the phraseology. They're just saying those things that don't really mean anything, that don't really translate into actual action steps. They just are nice things to hear, like corporate speaky kind of bullshit. Let's collectively stop saying that that's okay and that we take it, because we don't. I understand state education. I understand. I'm not saying any of this is easy. I'm just saying it's fucking worth the struggle. I will guarantee you, after running a high school for 4 years, it is always worth the motherfucking struggle. 100%, every day, every minute, every tear, everything, every failure, every fucking thing makes the struggle worth it. Everything. And it's not impossible. Like, these are not impossible. There's so many talented educators out there. There's so many talented educators out there. There's a lot of great brain power about this, but we don't tend to put, I don't know why we accept Pearson. I really don't. I don't get it. I do not understand it. I never understood it. I pushed so hard in my school to figure out how we could hit, whatever guidelines the state had for us in terms of curriculum. And I just like the monopoly that Pearson has on textbooks in this country is disgusting and sick. And Common Core isn't common, nor is it core. It doesn't reflect who our kids are. It doesn't reflect what they need to know. I'm sorry. Not sorry. You know, and I'm all about like how you help students manifest their learning, right? Like I think if they, you know, like help students manifest their learning is a beautiful, wonderful thing. Like that's a great fucking pedagogical tool or whatever. Local third graders reportedly interested in mint tea to alleviate stress, associate with some impending testing. That's great. Oh my God. The scientific method. Learning in action. What a fucking awesome thing. And here's the other thing. Kid-directed learning. There should be a part of every day that is kid-directed, where they get a sense of agency. Oh, really? Oh, no. There should be a part of the day where they get to choose a little bit of, you know, what they're learning, or, you know, like it can have some guardrails. Oh, no, I don't think. Wait a minute. Teachers should not be teaching students to be stressed over routine testing? What do you mean? Not telling them this or that herb does that? Oh, I see what you're saying. I thought the third graders were interested. Okay, I see what you're saying. The teacher is driving that. Well, I don't really recommend that teachers push, you know, kind of herb tea or any kind of medication on that. But it's like, well, I mean, that's the whole thing about testing in terms of stress and how we do that. But, you know, that's a whole other show. But I think that there are ways to help kids grow up a little less fucked up than we were. Next, deworming our third graders. Oh, God. Dragon. Oh, my God. Anti-science. She blinded me with science. Why is my third grader drinking tea? Why do they need that modeled? Yeah. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Well, it's a good point. No, your point is very well made. It's okay. No, your point is well made. It's like, you don't, they don't need, and also I think I know we're talking about not only the tea, but also like the stress inducing, right? The fact that there is stress built in around the routines or the testing or whatever, you know? So like there's a lot of ways where we expect kids to respond like adults. You know what I mean? Like how about those measles vaccines? Delousing and de-strepping, actually? What's that mean? I don't know. Dramatic third graders don't need that behavior modeled. Dramatic third graders. The thing about it is that, what was I saying? I can't remember now. It probably wasn't that great. I don't know. I think, oh, that's what I was saying. Okay, so like, I have seen instructors who approach children, either middle school or even elementary school. Oh, Pearson, yeah. I have seen those instructors reason with teens and others and younger as if they had like adult level cognitive abilities, right? With a kind of in a hopeful way. You know how you're pleading with a child and just like hoping that they're going to understand what it is you're trying to get across. It's kind of like that like last ditch effort. Um I think that is really I mean it's obviously easy to do. We all do it, but it's not something that really necessarily yields the best results. That's all. I'll say that. My daughter's favorite subject is science. Oh, second grade, little baby. That's a princess. Yeah, that's so cool. And boy, we need science teachers. I mean, I remember that just being the most challenging position to fill. Please, if you want to really make a difference in education, be a science teacher, especially a high school science teacher. If you could be a high school science teacher and help kids get really enthusiastic about science, you're the bestest in the world. We need you. I know I know that goes for all over the country. I just know it. I can't imagine it doesn't. Yeah. My favorite subject was recess. Mine too. And you know what? Recess is really important, right? Yeah. Yeah. It really is. I got to know the woman who founded Playworks, where they do like, playgrounds and stuff like that. I just loved it. I bet, gal. um, and she was such a voice for play. When it wasn't as cool in education. I remember working alongside her in Silicon Valley and a couple projects. And I thought it was such a cool. Playworks is a great organization. They did a really good work getting play out into public schools. I was really impressed. Really impressed with that team. My brother was a science teacher for middle and high school. He's a principal. I understand. That's the thing. The trajectory is administration, which is great. It's great to be the pedagogical leader of the school. Hopefully he's able to teach a couple of sections because that would be really great. It's always great to have the principal teach too, if they can. So, making kids eat in 10 minutes. Yes. Okay. There you go. See, Japanese modeling of interaction, assisting at meals, incredible. Both sons cannot eat in more than 15 minutes today. Yeah, that's the thing. And you had said something earlier, Dragon, about turning kids into test takers, not learning, curious children. Yeah. And, obviously it's easy to say and all that kind of stuff, but I just know that there are so many educators that do that, and they just aren't given enough bandwidth and incentive, frankly, to enter that fray, especially now after all this bullshit astroturfing of school boards and CRT nonsense and Chris Rufo creating a bogus fear of CRT and which is really an important element of understanding our country and its legal system. So I think it's parents refusing any homework. I know. And, parent engagement is another thing. Like, that's so important. Like, give schools the bandwidth to engage parents. Give them more social workers. Give them a nurse. We had to share a nurse among like 1,200 students in a building. A middle and a high school. And at one point, another little elementary school, like a small one. We had like over 1,200 kids in that building and one nurse? That's ridiculous. In Brooklyn? Have you called EMTs in Brooklyn? I'm telling you. My after disaster playground ideas. Yes. Yes. I haven't talked to her in a long time. I don't even know if she remembers me, but really, it's good organization. I haven't even checked to see if they really do things. Paul, what did you say? Oh, Paul, your brother was a science teacher. I think that's cool. I know. Gal, that was really brilliant with the disaster relief and how yeah. after disaster playground ideas. That's so fucking brilliant. See, this is the kind of like, there's so much great energy out there. How do we like harness that and like be nimble, you know? How do you be more nimble and really respond to what kids need? Like right now, I can't even imagine. I haven't really talked to a lot of my past educator friends, but I would like to catch up and see what's going on in schools trying to catch kids up from COVID. Like how is that going? I know I was talking with my school after as COVID was hitting, I was no longer working there. But I just know it was a challenging time, to say the least. So I can only imagine now, years on, how to try and catch up. Yeah, now DEI they're attacking. Like it's just ridiculous. We can't yield on that. We can't yield on those fucking bigoted bullshit mind fucks. I'm just not willing to. Not willing to. Yeah, no, 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 no. No, I don't want PE teachers giving out medications, voucher schools. I know. And I was part of the public charter system. I admit it. I didn't understand all the ins and outs of public education. I hadn't worked in public education prior to that, other than doing after school programming in for a while. But I now understand critics of charter. And while I believe the model that we were able to execute and what we were able to do with the arts, for example, but still maintain kind of oversight and accountability and demonstrate, academic growth, et cetera, I feel like I had more latitude than my public school counterparts. And I think that what is wrong with public education is more an administrative issue than it is, there's some pedagogical issues, but they have to do, I think, with administration, because I think it then comes back down to Pearson and back down to money and back down to whatever. So, blah, 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 blah. But I always, once I was in that situation and I went through it, I was kind of like, hey, I don't quite understand. Oh my gosh. I don't understand why am I able to make some achievements, and show progress, and my counterparts have, I don't know. It didn't make sense to me that we couldn't be more nimble. And so that's where I think my bullshit observation, because I'm not an expert, I'm not a pedagogue, and I never pretended to be. But I care about like process, and I care about what the outcomes are for kids. That's really what I've spent 22 years doing, was working from grief support to human trafficking to school setting to after school to international education to high school, like I spent over 20 years working on what I consider to be the front lines of education in different settings. And I just feel like, where's all the money going? And is there a better way? Like, is there a better way? I know a lot of the budgets of public schools in New York have to do with facilities. Can we make that easier? Like, shouldn't that be easier? I also know that without us as a high school, there wasn't enough high school, like there weren't enough high schools. So can we, that seems like, those seem like problems we can fix, right? Like I'm not, seems like problems we can fix. What? Houston ISD, which is really one of like the crucibles. I don't know if I'm using that word right, but I feel like Houston ISD has been one of the crucibles for public education in this, even going back to when I was in education, which was around, I don't know, 2016, 2016 to 2019. 2020. Beginning of 2020. Yeah, so anyway, that's my TED Talk. Never mind Oomp's TED Talk, which was valid. Thank you. I offer you my TED Talk.
And that's the truth.
No. So, wow. 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 Wowie. Wow. 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 I don't know. I certainly don't have the answers, by the way. Can I just tell you that 100% up front? I have no answers. I just have shit. I have fucking, I have opinions. No, baby, you never shut up. You never shut up. Don't ever shut up, Dragon. I love you so much. Just saw a story about Houston and its new head who came from DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth, but has been diverting money to his charter schools. Duh! And then the fact that, a charter school, a religious school is not a charter school. That's a private school. Okay? A religious school is a private school. Period. Full stop. Full stop. Not a charter, not a public charter, not a private charter. Well, it could be a private charter, but then it's a private school. Period. So stop calling yourself a charter and confusing the issue, because you're not. You're a private school. Private schools don't get public education money. That's why they're private. Period. Period. Well, pray for Houston. I feel like I want to get involved in local school boards. I feel like I should probably think about that. I don't think I can win an election. I just smoke too much weed. Sorry. And I'm not willing to give it up. No, I'm just kidding.
That's it. I admit it. I'm weak.
All right. Well, let's see. What is today? Wednesday. What is tomorrow? Thursday. We do have a date tomorrow morning. I think. Yes, I'm pretty sure we do. We have a date tomorrow morning. I think it's at 7 a.m. Pacific, which is 10 a.m. Eastern, everything in between and outside of that. And can you hear my house sparrows? They're building a nest outside. Big news today if you want to look up. I'd holler at right-wingers. I also see South Lake ISD parents called in the feds. Abbott. I know, Dragon. Texas, Texas, Texas. Texas. My beloved Texas, where my mama's buried. My mama's buried in Texas. So my heart is in Texas, actually. For reals. For reals, for reals. My dad once called her the yellow rose of Texas. He used to give her yellow roses. Well, once. I shouldn't say used to. He only did it once. But that's another story. No. Next week on cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm just kidding. Anyway, thank you everyone here at the lounge. I love you guys so much. I just love you so much. Have the best Wednesday. It's almost over, folks. You've almost made it. Don't give up now. You can't give up now. No, don't do it. And I will hopefully see you tomorrow. And take care and be good. Don't be bad. Don't be naughty. Yeah. And hey, it's Lolo out. Bum, bum, bum. Wait, why isn't it playing? Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
We're taking the ball for a ride. stupid, dumb